young man speaking in the city square, trying to tell somebody that he cares. Can you blame the voice of youth for asking what is true? Yeah, the ones that you're calling wild are gonna be the leaders in a little while. When will the lonely voice of youth cry, what is true? This our world's waking to a newborn babe, and I solemnly swear it'll be their way. You better help that voice of youth find what is true. And the lonely voice of youth cries, what is true?
All right. Welcome. It's another pirate live stream. This time, we're talking about the competency crisis. And I'm going to explain all this as time goes on. But first, just note, we've got our Sam Pell. We've got our Muppet Cup. Have you considered? And of course, I've got some tea from the Table Rock Tea Company. It's quite good. It's called Westminster. Oh, it smells delicious. Nice fruity smell. Very good stuff. I think to some extent this has been a long time coming, this topic. But look, it's been a busy week. Sort of like the calm before the storm, although in my case we had a storm yesterday. And overnight mostly. We had a hurricane. So that was no fun. But also, storms happen. Not a big deal. A few things sort of popped up. It sort of occurred to me that a lot of these socialist complaints that you hear online are more about momentum, right? Things are sort of going along the way they go along, and get out of the way of the train, or the train runs you over, because even if it stops when it sees you, it ain't stopping. Not in time. Other sort of socialist complaints tend to be about the knowledge and presumption of it, right? So socialism is predicated on things like, well, the workers are suffering. And mostly no, right? It's all based on this equality where it's a flat world and everybody knows everything that everybody else knows, which is not the world we live in, by the way. And it's not the world we can ever live in. The world is complex. And you can kind of see the competency crisis. It sort of came up for me. I flew up to Boston last Saturday and went to a concert on Monday with my uncle. I went into, well, first we had to get into the venue. Now, we saw ELO in New York at Madison Square Garden. It's a much larger venue than the Garden, the TD Garden, the Boston Garden, as they call it. And we got right in. And we went to the Boston Garden, which I've been to before they redid everything. And they had one entrance with one line that went all the way around the block. It was insane. Didn't used to be that way, by the way. So I don't know what changed. Although there's all these skyscrapers right around the garden. You can't even see the garden anymore. It's hidden. I don't know what the hell happened. But then, after being in line for far too long, we ended up getting our seats, and then I had to go to the bathroom, and I go into the bathroom, and they've got urinals with separators between the urinals that are, these quarter panels separate. They're clear plastic. And I'm like, what purpose does this serve? It's not floor to ceilings. It's not really helping you with, disease spread. And they're clear. So, the perverted people can still see. Which, could be a problem. It's strange. And one of the patterns I've been noticing this week is people want things personalized. I don't think they realize the trade-off that's going on there, right? The more you personalize something, the less you have in common with others. I think once you look, you'll see that pattern for yourself. It's kind of everywhere at this point. Now we've got this crazy FBI whistleblower testifying before Congress, telling you to vote, stock food, arm yourself, and pray. We're kind of screwed. It's been worse than you have imagined for longer than you imagine. And that's one of the causes of all the conspiracy and the panic and the marches on Washington that are somehow expected to go differently than the last one, even though there's no actual difference to the people who matter. And the thing is, when people who are stupid and bad at their alleged craft can make money, right, can be successful in some sense, society falls. And I sort of discovered this rather by accident because I'm involved in some Twitter threads that are strange to me. There's an outfit called StoryGrid. It's a nice little website. You can check out the resources, check out the heroes. Bad descriptions of movies and books, and a bad description of heroes, some of which are not heroes, they're protagonists. And some of the grammar is wrong. And these guys are going to teach you how to write a successful book. I've got questions. So, as I said, we had a storm, we had a hurricane, Hurricane Helene. And at one point, I read an article that said it was a once in a lifetime hurricane. And I thought, what depth of stupidity is actually required to make a statement that dumb? Hurricanes happen all the time in this area. All the time. We have a hurricane season, and it lasts for several months. Now, Category 5 hurricanes don't happen every year, but they happen every 5 years? For those of you keeping score at home, 5 years is not a lifetime. Now, one of the problems is the thing they don't seem to understand anymore, but we used to understand this about hurricanes is time. And no, really, it's a simple thing, right? Let me explain to you how this works. So when I was studying weather, pretty good meteorology type person for predictions on weather, at least for New England, not as good for here because kind of stopped caring, and B, not much to the weather here, really, not compared to New England. Storms need energy. This is more of a physics problem, really, but a very basic kind of high school physics. I didn't go to college, so I don't know no college physics, just in case you're wondering. Storms need energy. They pick up their energy from warm water. If a storm goes over warm water and strengthens to, I don't know, category 3 or a category 4, then once it hits land, it will just dissipate almost instantly, in fact. Now, the reason why hurricanes when I was in New England were so dangerous is because if they were still hurricanes, even by the time they hit New York, which, I mean, you're near New England, but still a few hundred miles to go, um, that was a big deal because even if they were tropical storms, they were very, very powerful. And when they came on land, they wouldn't lose much of their power. Now, often they didn't come on land. Hurricanes in New England are reasonably rare. Down south here, where I am now in South Carolina, yeah, not so much. Like every Friday, a lot of hurricanes. The reason for this is that if a hurricane happens to travel up the coast, typically it will travel in the Gulf Stream, and the Gulf Stream is a stream of warm water coming out of the Gulf Coast. When it doesn't sit in the warm water very long, the hurricane, while it may be categorized as a 4 or a 5 based on wind speed, does not have that much momentum, doesn't have that much stored energy. Hurricanes act like giant batteries. That's kind of how they work. That's one way to think about them. Somehow we have lost this understanding. And now we think a storm in the Gulf means, and this was a Cat 4. By the way, it turned into a tropical storm like 4 seconds after it hit the Gulf, after it hit the coast. I'm just saying. Um, and hurricanes in the Gulf generally tend to move fast. They're not slow moving storms. Sometimes one gets caught in the Gulf and meanders around. Those are dangerous because those will come on land and stay at Cat 5 for a long time. Or they're in the Caribbean. If they form in the Caribbean and they strengthen, that's very dangerous because they store up a lot of energy. And somehow nobody knows this in the weather community anymore. It's very strange. Like they used to, I used to watch weather reports where they talked about all of this. That's where I got it from. I didn't invent it. I learned it. It was explained to me by competent people. And the thing is, incompetence is everywhere now. It's so bad, we don't see good ideas and bad ideas. All ideas seem to be good because they are emergent. The exploratory excitement of something new, something novel, keeps people enchanted to the point where things shine so bright that they cannot tell a good idea from a bad idea, a good outcome from a bad outcome, good from evil. You are blinded by the light of the emergence. It's not necessarily ideological possession as such. It's worse. It's more prevalent. It's more pervasive. It's more pernicious. And this is the problem with the age of gnosis, where knowledge is propositions, and propositions, as knowledge, are the highest value. They aren't. When you treat them that way, you get blinded by emergence, blinded by the light of the new, the novel, the exciting, something you can explore. Exploration takes time, energy, and attention away from other things like being competent, learning to be competent. And there's no standard of competency. There's no standard of what to be good at and how many things to be good at. You could spend all of your time being good at video games, being a competent video game player. This is contributing to the competency crisis, as backwards as that may sound. It matters what you're competent at. That competence came at the expense of being competent at something else. We have limits. Time is one limit. Energy is another limit. Attention is another limit. There are other limits still, constraints, if you will. And there's either no exemplification of competency, right? It's very hard to find good programmers, actually. We have too many programmers who suck, or there's too much competency, or there's misplaced competency. Someone like Elon Musk, bad exemplar because he's an outlier. And one might argue he's competent at the wrong things. The poor guy signed away his son's, I don't know, integrity because he was busy being competent at other things. That's a problem. That's a big, serious problem. And the thing is, measuring competency isn't a simple, flat thing. Competency requires a minimum level of skill, raw ability, but also a sense of how things fit together. What comes first, second, and third? Sequence, importance or priority, right? Quality. Those are some of the elements, if I may reduce them, that make competence. Proper ability to move your body, proper strength, the things that video games actually ruin for you, by the way. And no, there isn't a way to fix that. Stop trying to redeem bad things that steal competency from one area and give it to a useless skill. You have a limit to how many skills you can learn. When you take the frame for granted, competence is not possible because you're starting what I call middle out. You're starting from yourself. That's individualism. And you cannot orient in the world if you start from yourself, at least not properly. You will resist constraint because you cannot accept it and still think for yourself. That's right. But really, you can't think for yourself. You've never done it. You're not ever going to do it. It's not possible. There were a bunch of things here that allow your thought to happen. There was a bunch of exemplification. There's a bunch of things that you're mimicking. There are a bunch of facts you have to take for granted in order to think. To try to think for yourself, because you're told that you can, you remove constraint. But that just overloads your cognition anyhow, and it creates a flat world. And maybe you can seem competent at whatever is in that world, but now you may be decent at only one thing. Hopefully, it's not just a video game. But for many, it is. Think about that. And the follow on to that problem is a level of disbelief in the world. If you meet somebody as a gamer who actually knows how to fix a house, how to do plumbing and electrical work, and how to work on cars, and how to sail a boat, and how to program video games, and maybe other things, and how to set up a network. And maybe they know basic meteorology. And I mean, this is unimaginable to the video gamer because they only know one thing, maybe two, maybe three. That's it. They don't actually know any of these other things, and they know it, maybe unconsciously, but they know it. Now what? Well, they don't believe that other person. They seem to have too many skills, too much competence. They can't be trusted. You can't trust Elon Musk. What's he doing? He's got his fingers in too many pies. He can't know all of that stuff. Maybe he can. I don't know. Seems like he's doing a decent job, but you won't believe it. This is the skepticism and the cynicism. I have a video on the skeptical cynicism that, the misunderstanding, I'll call it, of Socrates has left us with. And it has. And it's bad. But let's move over to more practical considerations. What is a red flag? Do we know? How can you be competent at anything if you cannot see when a line is crossed, when things have gone too far? And this ability is distinct from any specific manifestation of competence. Just think about that. Competence doesn't work without clear boundaries. There are lots of dependencies to competence that we don't consider that have been removed, leading to a competency crisis. It's a problem, a big problem. You can call out a red line if it's not enforced. One issue with the very idea of competence is that it relies on telos, on final cause, like everything else. You can compromise your competence with a poor telos. Maybe you could make a good movie or write a good book and then fail, even though you clearly have the skills, you have the right skills, you've implemented them before, but because of the poor telos, the bad aim, if you will, your second movie, your second book go poorly, and maybe your third and your fourth and your fifth. That happens all the time. We see this. The reason you're doing something affects your competency at the thing. And it's confusing. It looks like chaos. But it's just all the more part of the competency crisis. It's all the same. It's all more competency crisis. The whole thing. Beware. Past performance is no guarantee of future success. Not when you have a crisis of competency, my friends. And that we have. And the thing is, it's hard to see this sometimes because we flatten the world. Anyone can flatten the world. And maybe none of your world flattening is wrong or wrong enough. It's just incomplete. So it's hard to see that it's useless because maybe it's new. It's a new flattening of the world. You hadn't heard that flattening before. And you can't tell that it's a flattening. And you can't tell that that flattening is worthless. You can put anything in a Venn diagram, anything. There are memes about this all over the internet. Well, if you can make a meme with a Venn diagram and it's funny because it's absurd, that's kind of an indication that you can put anything in a Venn diagram. And a Venn diagram is a very flat thing. Now, that can be very useful in very tight constraints, for sure. You have a context that allows for a flattening to show you something, that's fantastic. But that doesn't exist in the regular world. Not without that context. Did you get that first? Did somebody just hand you a Venn diagram? It might be right, but it might be worthless. And it's hard to see that because it's new. That is just one of the signs of the competency crisis. And AI is both a harbinger of a competency crisis and an accelerator of it. I use AI. There's nothing wrong with AI, but it matters what you use it for and how you use it and what that looks like. Other signs, the unwillingness or worse yet, inability to provide an example after you make a claim. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's Plato. If the claim is made, I need to see an example and some evidence to back up that example that your claim is valid. I'm not just going to let you make a claim and get away with it without backing it up. Who said this? Who made the claim? How did they make that claim? What words did they use? This matters a great deal. When did this happen? And it's all this disconnectedness from things like final cause, from things like actual implementation, right? What does it say in the allegory of Plato's cave? Yeah, that's a good question. See my video on the lies of Plato's cave. Because the people who've been telling you what Plato's caves is all about are wrong. And Plato says they're wrong, and not me. You can read it yourself. Like, I don't care. I give you all the references in the video. But it's all this disconnectedness, the intimacy crisis, indeed. Right? We've lost the quality of relationships. It's this disconnectedness from reality that causes us to be less competent than we were, less competent than we need to be. That's the competency crisis. It puts us in a situation where we prefer our fantasy. And science, unfortunately, tells us we can have our fantasy over reality. Of course, you can live forever. We're just, 4 drug findings away from the perfect formula. What? You've been saying that for 150 years, guys. At some point, I don't believe you anymore. But science tells us we can. We can just carve up the world and rebuild everything differently. So why bother with reality? I did this in a video game, so why can't we science our way into it? Someone had the idea, and the idea is the hard part, right? No, ideas are easy. People have ideas all the time. Competency is all about implementation. If you're not good at implementing, it's a good sign you're not competent. That's all. It's not about ideas. It's not about skills. It's not about knowledge. And it's not about wisdom. Those are different things. And they're different from competency. And none of those things convey competency. It's about manifesting things in the world. Competent people come up with results. They have things to show for their work. You can independently experience their work, whether they're there or not. Competency is not the agreement of the propositions. That doesn't make anything competent. Competency requires some form of education. And I've talked about education and training in some videos before. But education involves training and what people are usually talking about when they use the word education, which is formation. But education also needs to open you up to think properly about the world, to put things together in right relationship, not just in your head, as I just mentioned. Education allows you to know good things from bad things. Is this a good chair or a bad chair? A competent person will know. Competency involves knowing how to move, why to move, when to move, where to move, when not to move. The quality of the movement is important. The more quality your movement, the more competent you are. It's not the only component, but it's an important one. And education should allow you to discern goals properly and assess their goodness or badness through time. If you can't do that, if you can't see what's coming from what just happened, you're not competent, at least at that thing. That's good to know. If you make a stupid public statement and there's a backlash and you didn't see it coming, maybe you shouldn't make public statements anymore. And the thing is, part of education is training, and training requires humility. Training is boring, partly why you need humility to do it. But without training, you build up a capacity, you build up an energy, a charge, and you're more sensitive to boredom, which makes it harder to train yourself, to discipline yourself. And then you don't learn how to regulate your anxiety. That's what anxiety is. Anxiety is unregulated energy. You become used to constant stimulus. You expect it. You are now used to partying, maybe drugs. This is because you haven't trained yourself to be calm, to enjoy boring things, to go through the process of doing the same thing over and over again to dissipate your energy slowly. So you don't have to dissipate it all at once and wipe yourself out. This is actually really important. And people don't realize it because they don't know what proper education is. I don't know why. And some things cannot be learned on your own. Well, I would say most things. And in fact, none of the important things. You can't learn any of the important things on your own. You need contrast to see. You need additional perspectives to inform you and so that you remain sane, so that you can stay on course. You can't learn competence by yourself entirely. Maybe you can improve your competence by yourself. Someone's got to set the standard, and it can't be a book. Very upsetting. I know it is. But you need those other people. You need exemplars. You need people to correct you. It's annoying, but you need that. You need to talk problems through with others. You need their additional perspective, even if it's wrong. Bad perspective just shows you how much better your perspective is, so you shouldn't fear that. And a good perspective is an improvement on yours, so you should be open to that. That'll increase your competency. When we try to show people how to do things through propositions, we have a loss of valuable information. Relationships, sequence, quality, reasons, or telos, understanding. We no longer know what is connected and what is not, and why. You can't know that with propositions, even if the propositions state it. We need to know why things are connected, to know if that connection should be kept or sacrificed in any particular situation or Implementation, that's competence. Knowing what to leave out because you don't need it for this run. Maybe you're writing some software. We don't need this function because we're not going to use it. That's competence. We're going to need to write an additional function because it's not normally used. That's competence. Oh, when you cut this board, you should do it this way. That's competence. Normally, you would do it this other way, but in this case, you only get that by doing, by participating. Because we need to know why things are connected, if that connection should be kept or sacrificed in any particular situation. Sometimes it should be sacrificed. Competency is all about knowing what sacrifice is important and which sacrifice not to ever make for your given implementation. It's a tough road to hoe, ultimately. It's a difficult task. It requires a great deal of discernment, which is probably why people don't want to do it. And reading, like meditation, is not an action. See my previous live stream on action. Now, you think something happened because you were reading when nothing happened. It did not happen. Suddenly, you are competent because you read something. I've got news. That didn't happen. This is false. Reading doesn't convey competence. It might jumpstart your ability to learn, but it most likely will not. Because if you read too much, you will get cognitively overloaded. It takes time away from participating, from doing things in the world, from learning by doing, from learning by making mistakes. When you read a book, you could make mistakes of reading and comprehension, and most people do, by the way, which is another problem with reading. Did you read it right? You didn't read Plato's Republic right, I'll tell you that much. Reading cannot train you or teach you or educate you. Perhaps you can use it for implementing a training plan or for educating yourself, but that isn't the same thing. It's a component at best, not a solution. It's also not required. Almost everything that everybody learned or became educated in was the result of apprenticeship not too very long ago. Think about that. Maybe burn all your books. So, how on earth did we get here? What led to this competency crisis that we're clearly in? For one thing, I think too much of parenting now seems outsourceable. You have a screen as a babysitter. You have government guidelines to tell you what to do and where and when. Kind of flattens out the world, like all kids need this by this age. What? Media information sources and schools mean parents can take less responsibility and outsource the raising of their children, forcing the kids to form themselves. No common formation, which makes it hard to cooperate, makes it hard to be competent, because you cannot learn from others. And well, we're seeing the results of that now because that happened a long time ago. And the results are incompetence. You don't know how to cooperate. You don't know what commonality is or how to have things in common with other people. Well, that's going to cause a competency crisis. And you're going to have the inability to show people when they are wrong because you don't know how to determine this. And they don't know how to determine this on their own because of a lack of proper education and because of a lack of pushback. And then when people get pushback, they think everyone's mean. You're mean. Too bad. Maybe meanness will make you better. Not meanness certainly made you worse. Just saying. And also, this idea of forming yourself causes the individualist fantasy world framing. It's this middle out world, right? The world starts and ends with your perspective. This was how you were brought up. And then people are bending stories to fit into their world or to fit themselves into some other world. The thing is, stories are supposed to exemplify something outside of you, something you strive for, not something you live in now and not something you lived in the past. And part of this problem comes from the idea of psychology. And this is a lack of submission to something higher. You're either trying to own it or subvert yourself to it. That's not submission to something higher, like virtues and values. And this goes all the way up and all the way down because the thing is, you cannot have a proper relationship with that which is below you, maybe in every possible sense of the term below you, without submission. Because you have to be able to submit to meet somebody below you where they're at. You have to be able to submit to look low enough. Jordan Peterson, he talks about being able to look low enough. I forget who he's quoting there. But that's interesting, isn't it? Competency doesn't work in an arrogant, individualistic society. And we have an arrogance problem. That's for sure. People let other people get away with being stupid, saying stupid things, being wrong, factually inaccurate. And so incompetency spreads. 'Cause when you don't push back on bad ideas, the bad ideas become more plausible to everybody listening, even the ones who know they're bad ideas. You're making the problem worse because you don't want to sacrifice the conversation. But maybe you should sacrifice the conversation for the truth. That might be a thing. Curating the larger signal, the broadcast signal, is important for competency, but we aren't doing that anymore. We want no more censorship, whatever that's supposed to mean. The definition of censorship seems to be if I don't have the audience that I want that agrees with me, then I'm being censored. It certainly isn't Tucker Carlson, given the number of people that watch him. Who's censoring you, dog? If you have an audience that big, if anyone's being censored, it's me. And I'm not complaining about it. And the thing is, no one's in charge. No one wants to lead. And there's no way to competency in this kind of a situation. It's not just the competency of the leaders, it's the competency conveyed by leadership. Oops. We've talked about that before, leadership and the leadership crisis. That's another crisis we're going through. So, how do we get out? Hopefully, I've already hinted at this and you've kind of picked up on it. Accountability, consequence, calling out incompetency, standing your ground, knowing where you stand and why. And if you don't, if you can't explain it, especially to yourself, which you have to be honest about, but even just to others, then shut up. Seriously, reconsider your position if you can't explain it. I'm not saying you're wrong. You might not be wrong. You might just be unable to explain your position. But if you can't explain your position, maybe don't state it to others yet. Maybe. Knowing what you know and how little that is. Knowing when you don't know something. Stating it out front. I don't know about that. You want my opinion? Can't have my knowledge about it. I don't have any. Maybe I have an opinion. Also not required. Maybe I don't have an opinion. I don't know anything about it. That's possible too. Boy, no one likes that answer. I don't know why. It's weird. Everybody says, "Oh, yeah, people say talk about things they don't know anything about." And it is the very same people who, well, you have to have an opinion. Like, bro, can't have both. That's a problem. You need to pay attention to who makes good predictions and who gives more excuses for being wrong about past predictions. If you're giving excuses for your past predictions being wrong, probably because you're wrong, not because your excuses are good, even if they're valid. It just means you made a bad prediction and you just suck it up. And if you can't suck it up, you shouldn't be listened to. Now, should you? Being aware of what people are doing and ignoring, to a large extent, what the hell they're saying. Not all the time. Then you can match what they say with what they do, with the results of their actions. Because all three of those are important: what you say, what you do, and what the results are. They all matter. They all give you additional perspective and contrast. Lots of people have good intent, but incompetence makes that dangerous. All the good intent in the world in an incompetent person will destroy the world, because intent doesn't create the world and it doesn't change the world. What changes the world is manifestation, it's action, not intent. You can infer intent from action. You might get that wrong, by the way, but it's better than inferring intent from anything else, especially words, propositions. Don't ever infer intent from propositions. My goodness. It's not even relevant. Even if your intent and your propositions match, if you're incompetent, you're going to make the world a worse place no matter what. Maybe you should be prevented from doing that, because if you exemplify incompetence and lack of success is not the result, chastisement is not the result, then the world gets worse in a hurry. Go read the Story Grid website. This guy's successful somehow. I don't know what movie he watched called The Matrix, but it wasn't the one I watched. I know that. I don't know what he watched in the movie called Star Wars with Luke Skywalker, but it wasn't the Star Wars I saw. I know that. Call out ignorance, failure, and failure to change. Those are different things. Call out bad behaviors, errors, bad assumptions, bad framing, and evil. You'll get that wrong sometimes. I get that. Suck it up. It's better than doing nothing and perpetuating, or worse yet, accelerating the incompetency crisis, because that's what we've done so far, and it hasn't really worked out very well. Now, has it? Depressingly enough, don't be thinking that competency is going to solve a problem either, because aimed the wrong way, it won't lead to the good. A highly competent person aimed at money or fame or personal pleasure or ideology or an ideal society will corrupt the world rather effectively and efficiently. That's not better. Plus, being competent at one thing doesn't translate, even when it should. So beware. Think hard about things and discern. That's the only way to make the competency crisis better. That, my friends, is all I have to say about that. But if you wish, I'm going to post the link on navigating patterns and Randas United. I don't know if it posts anywhere else. Feel free to join me and we can talk about the competency crisis further, or anything else except your personal insecurities, because that's no fun. Oh, competency crisis indeed. I don't think my flag will be falling down today. I think we solved that problem. No guarantees, of course, because you never know until you actually try something if it's going to work. I don't claim any special competency in flags. Maybe by the end of many live streams, I will be flag competent, at least with respect to private flags and live streams. Overly specific, I know, but also competency doesn't exact. A lot of people think it does, but a lot of competency is a matter of experience and nothing else. And if you don't participate, if you don't have experience, the competency ain't coming. So I don't know. A lot of people claim competency and man, the number of people that don't do research on people, like, I don't know, man. All I'm saying is, had you known about Anthony Fauci's past, the COVID thing, A, wouldn't have been a surprise to you. And B, the whole thing would become much more clear. Just saying. Patterns exist. They're real. And that was one. So incompetency confirmed. And that's the problem when we don't look at the world, but we believe what we hear. Incompetency creeps in pretty easily because it's very easy for people to sound smart and not be smart. And you don't know unless you look at what they've done. You don't know about competence until there's implementation, until there's manifestation of something. That's how you measure competence. And it's also hard to know because I've met a lot of people who, oh, that guy's incompetent. It's like, well, no, you just didn't understand what he was doing. Okay, so it's not an easy thing. Discernment is not easy. And I think we get confused because we want to believe that discernment is easy, or we want an easy way to discern, and we're not getting that. That's not the world we live in. But we're not very competent at determining competence anymore. We're busy reading books, looking things up online, and then thinking we know something, right? That's age of gnosis, knowledge through propositions, instead of knowledge through actual experience or participation, right? Participation is the thing that creates knowledge, not information. What's on the internet is information. There's no knowledge on the internet. Knowledge is something that's you create in your head. That you create knowledge. Knowledge doesn't exist outside of your experience. A lot of people get that confused. And that's another cause of the incompetency problem, right? The crisis of competency is all wrapped up in people thinking they know things because they've been informed. And what informed you? Yeah, maybe the thing that informed you was not correct. And so the information that you have is wrong. But you can't just say misinformation and therefore, because what is misinformation and who determines that? Right. Leads right back into the problem. And a lot of this is wrapped up in the idea that you can know all this or do all this on your own by yourself as an individual. And of course, that's impossible. And so we're constantly coming up with solutions that cannot work, solutions around absolute freedom or freedom from everything or freedom from all constraint or lack of censorship or something goofy. I don't know why anybody thinks censorship is a problem or what it's going to solve to try to remove it. Have you looked at YouTube and seen how much information is there? Those people aren't being censored. I mean, how do you determine what goes into your feed in any system that has a million users? I can tell you, but from experience in computer technology, that is not a trivial problem to solve at all. And it's not a solved problem either. The problem of what information gets to where is a very big and deep problem, especially in computers. And that is censorship. Yes, that is a form of censorship. What information gets where is censorship. It's also not a solvable problem in that way. You just have to accept censorship. You have to accept that you can't take in and filter all of the information of the world, or even all of the information of the people who have information to give you. That's not even remotely close to being practical. And if you don't know that, I understand that that can be distressing, but also, uh, too bad. A competent person would understand this. Maybe you're just not competent. I knew somebody a few years, well, I still know him, but a few years ago, he was telling me he's have the API key to Twitter for the main feed. And he's like, I can't figure out what to do with it. And we were discussing how much actual data was coming across that pipe. And because we're both computer geeks and high performance, high end, so called big data. And let me tell you, it was a lot of data. And the problem really was, how do you filter out the useful data from the not useful data? Well, that's a good freaking question, especially when a lot of that data relies on context, on connections to other pieces of data. Like who's friends with whom on Twitter? Who's following whom? Right? How many views do things get? That might be an indicator of interest, but it's really kind of not. It's an indicator of interest for the group of people it's been served to. And maybe that group of people has a filter pre-designed, like maybe it's all the people that you know that are already friends with you. It gets really complex really fast. And if you haven't worked on large systems like that, you don't realize how difficult the quote censorship problem or the problem of what data to feed to people really is. Because you can't figure that out by yourself, not even close. And I know nobody likes to hear that, but also too bad because that's the constraint of the world. There's just way too much data. There's too many YouTube channels. There's too many interesting things that you're missing. There's too many versions of history. There's it's on and on and on, right? And look, most of the versions of history, historical rewrites, like Tucker Carlson did not too long ago with his buddy, are wrong. They're wrong. Why do you want to see wrong things? I don't know. I don't know. Ethan, my good friend. What does Ethan have to say? Alcohol is a good symbol for, quote, freedom. It loosens constraint, which can be good or bad. But everyone is convinced they need to be 100% shit faced all the time. That is true. Well, that's a relatively new idea, right? The Puritans, for example, did not look kindly on getting drunk, even when they allowed bars, right? Uh, because they realized a little bit of loosening up is not necessarily a bad thing, or at least some of them did. Um, but yeah, I mean, now the idea really is to get plastered, which is an escape. It's an escape from a constraint. Now, those constraints may be internal to you, but maybe those internal constraints are good. Like, don't just sleep with anybody who will sleep with you, for example. It's a good example for alcohol. Um, we often use drugs of various kinds to loosen up our own internal constraints, and that kind of catches up with you. Druggies tend to die in their mid 40s. I'm just saying. I was doing some research about 4 years ago on this. and for personal reasons. And somebody in the Guardian, the British newspaper there, was writing that, well, maybe we need to rethink the fact that that we allow cocaine because all my friends are dying in their mid 40s and I miss them. It's pretty much the gist of the article. It was a hysterical article. Probably 6 years old now, 7, something like that. Um, I was like, yeah, maybe, dude. Oops, too late. And then, probably most of them didn't have children. But like, if they did, their parents are dying in their 40s because of drugs. So, oops, that's not better. And that's the lack of constraint. Legalize pot. What could possibly go wrong? All the things they said in the 30s, 40s, and 50s about why you shouldn't legalize pot. Turns out they were right. And we kind of know that now, by the way. Probably haven't paid attention, but I know people who said they were never going back to Colorado. I was like, what? The service was so bad at the restaurant that they just couldn't do it anymore. And that was because everybody was high on pot. Ixnon. Turns out we need censorship of signals, information, and knowledge in order to cultivate competency. Well said, sir. Well said. Yeah, we do. We do. I mean, competency is all about that filtering. It's about knowing what to leave out, what to sacrifice, right? And when, and what to include, and when, and why. And sometimes people get that wrong. I get that, but also, and then because we haven't had competency, we don't know an incompetent person when we see one. I mean, we've got a vice president and a president, neither of whom are competent, probably ever were. And that was evident, by the way, to people like me. I'm just saying, if you didn't catch it, like, fair enough. But also, that's part of the competency crisis: is you don't recognize competency and incompetency, and the filters hierarchy is supposed to filter for competency. I mean, that's what meritocracy is. It's the statement that hierarchy filters for competency, not just knowledge, but ability. And we're not doing that anymore. There's no filter for competency in hierarchies anymore. It's just not there. Why it's not there? Well, that's something I really honestly, personally don't understand. But it's not there. Like, this is a serious issue. It's a very serious issue if you ask me. It's a big problem. So it's it's worth thinking about. The competency crisis is here, and it's a big crisis. It's a huge problem. It's not a small problem. It's a huge problem. And it's affecting pretty much everything, by the way. And that's one of the issues. It's affecting everything. And we don't even notice the competency crisis. That's how incompetent we are on average. Competence itself is a foreign concept. That's why I did this stream. It's hopefully straighten that out at least a little bit for people. Cassandra, I remember you said something about the leaders and experts not being the same thing, and we can't simply listen to experts. This feels related. Good memory on your part, Cassandra. Yeah. Experts and leaders do not need to have any overlap. That frightens everybody, I know. But also, this is an agenosis problem. Like, knowledge is not the thing, my friends. It's really not. It's one small component that happens to be way less important than everybody thinks. A good leader will listen to an expert and decide whether or not that expert is correct or correct enough. So you might hear, as a leader, from an expert about a disease. You may decide that that expert, the last time they pulled this trick in the 80s, was an idiot and wrong about everything and not listen to them. Unfortunately, you might also decide to listen to them because there's lots of experts screaming at you. And experts don't agree on things. I don't know where people get that idea from. So they're not the same thing. The leader should decide whether or not to listen to the expert based on other criteria, because the expert may be right, but the trade-off may not be worth it. And the expert won't know that because the expert is only expert at the thing they're expert at. And they're probably not good at trade-offs at all. And competency is all about that. When you have a competent leader, they can make those decisions and they take responsibility for those trade offs. And when you have an incompetent leader, they don't. Either they can't even make the decisions, which is really likely, or they can make the decisions, but they can't take responsibility for those decisions. That's an incompetent leader. A competent expert may know their field, and that's good, but that's insufficient to make a decision in the world outside of that expertise. So if it's computer programming and you're an algorithm design person and you say, oh, well, the best way to design this algorithm is to have it work this way. And somebody else goes, but the result of that is that people will not see the content they most want to see. Well, the mismatch there's lots of ways that can be mismatched. The mismatch there might be as simple as the best way to do an algorithm is usually based on compute efficiency. Okay. I do not care as a user about compute efficiency. Now, as a professional in the computing industry, I love performance. I love to tune for performance and I love to make computers go faster, right? But that is not the right answer for most problems. There are certain specific areas where tuning for performance, especially in compute, is really important, especially in the cloud for cost. Unfortunately, no companies care about cost because I could save any company 30% off their cloud bill, probably more, in 4 seconds. But nobody cares, so nobody will hire me to do it, which is fine. This has been independently verified by other people, by the way. And it's part of the competency crisis, right? These people aren't competent. You should save your business some money. You spend a little money up front on me, who will charge you an arm and a leg for sure, but it'll be nothing compared to the amount of money you save, rather than waste your company's money. But actually, companies are not as greedy as people think. In fact, companies waste more money than they save by several orders of magnitude. And they don't care about that, by the way, at all. Verizon, for example, spends ungodly amounts of money per month on AWS. It's a number in the millions. And Verizon has no reason to do this. They have their own cloud product. They own their own data centers and they own all tier one networks. Anything they build in their own infrastructure is going to be faster and better and cheaper by several orders of magnitude than anything in AWS. And yet they spend the money on AWS. And there are some good business reasons for that, by the way. I mean, I don't think they're good because I can't understand the justification of spending millions and millions of dollars when you'd be spending $100,000 a month at most, right? But whatever. Yeah. Ixnon. To quote Mark Lefevre, oh, thank you, sir. You should quote him often. The world needs you to be better. That is true. That is true. And I think ultimately, a statement like that sort of bears repeating. The world needs you to be better, which means being competent. And we don't, like I said, we don't even know what competence looks like anymore. We can't tell a competent person from an incompetent person. Right? People will have Destiny on to talk to them. Destiny's not competent at anything except maybe video games. And that's fine. Like, whatever. If that's your competency, that's your competency. You're a clown and an entertainer, and that's fine. We need clowns and entertainers. But I'm not going to listen to you about philosophy, politics, people, society, culture, computers, the climate. I'm just not going to listen to you about those things because you're a clown. You're an entertainer. You're not somebody who has facts readily at hand. And in the case of Destiny, this is the blows my mind. The guy just makes shit up. He lies all the time. Everything I've ever heard him say is factually incorrect and can be validated in under 1 minute on the internet as being wrong. And people are still listening to him. Why? Because we don't know what competency looks like. He's not competent in what he's speaking about. I'm sorry for that. He's also not competent in holding down a relationship or being a father or much of anything else, right? And he gets all his gnosis, his information, his knowledge from other gamers on the internet. I can't actually think of a worse way to do it. There might be one because I'm not going to claim competency in knowing the worst ways to become knowledgeable or infiltrated with propositional gnosis because that's just not my expertise for sure. But I can't think of a better way to make sure you're not knowledgeable than getting your information from gamers on the internet. I'm sorry. There are some very smart people who game, but like, look, and gaming for entertainment, I'm all for it. I've played my share of video games. I'm not a gamer by any stretch. I was a top level Quake World player for sure. I was very, very good, very good. And I spent a lot of time on Quake Worlds, no question. Um, but that was my entertainment. I mean, that was my downtime, right? I also slept 4 hours a night and worked 20 hours every day and liked to keep extraordinarily busy, the kind of busy that would most people can't believe and would drive people insane to watch. That's not an exaggeration. Can't do that anymore. I can every once in a while when I'm not sick, I can, and that's great because I really catch up. But I can't do that anymore. But before I was sick, I could do that all the time. I did it every day. I'd wake up, sleep 4 hours, wake up, bang, and I would hit the world running, and the world would get the hell out of my way because it knew better. That's great. I got so much work done. I learned so much stuff. Wow, I became good at a bunch of stuff. Right? And that's the other problem, like I mentioned, like, the number of people that just don't believe me because I make all these claims about things I've done is stunning, and I'm like, "No, dude, uh, I'm well, first of all, I'm not well read. I haven't read any of the classics. I've read 1 Shakespeare play. That's it, 1. I don't intend to read any others because iambic pentameter makes me homicidal. Um, I haven't read Canterbury Tales, I haven't read War and Peace. I mean, I'm finally reading Moby Dick. I finally read The Republic. You can see those book clubs. Texas Wisdom Community has a Republic book club that I did with it was Danny's book club. I did that with Danny and Manuel and Ethan and a few others. And Father Eric Site's channel, we're doing the Moby Dick book club. We're about halfway through Moby Dick. That's been excellent. We got about maybe 10, 11, 12 more weeks, something like that. Uh, I'm doing Language of Creation. That's obviously not a classic, but it kind of should be. Also not a book because it's more pictures. That you can see on Navigating Patterns, of course. But I'm not well read. And I know people who are way better at a bunch of the stuff I'm really good at, uh, and more stuff. Like this isn't unusual. Now to a gamer, how do you do it? Where do you find the time? I don't game. Like I'm not stuck on the computer playing Call of Duty all the time. That's all. It's not a magic trick. It's just wisely allocating what time you have. And the other thing is some people have different amounts of time. You got to sleep 8 hours a night. You're 4 hours a day behind me, buddy. Or at least used to be. I sleep more than 4 hours now. Um, but sorry. What do you want me to do? Some people sleep 10 hours a night. Good for them. I don't. If I sleep 10 hours a night, it's because I have a bad cold, like a really bad cold. Such is my life. I'm blessed. I'm blessed. I've been sick in bed all day 4 times in my life, ever, ever. Yep. Even when I've been in the hospital, I can get up and run around. And I've been sick in bed. Uh, I had kidney stones, and I was up and about in a few hours. Sorry, just heal real fast. So you can't compete with that, right? And that's fine. Like it's not a big deal. I don't hold it over anybody. But I'm also bewildered when they don't believe me. It's like, yeah, I know how to fix cars. I know how to sail. I'm a decent programmer. I'm not a great programmer or anything. I was a much better programmer years ago when I did it every day. A really good systems engineer. Man, can I tune for performance? Computers, oh, especially in the cloud. Oh yeah, really good at that. But I do that all the time, constantly tuning things and messing with them. I'm good at taking things apart and putting them back together. Electronic things, mechanical things, all kinds of things. Still do it all the time, right? I'm not very good at soldering, but I can solder decently enough, right? I know some basic electronics. I know a bunch about radios. I know a bunch of meteorology. I know a bunch of geology. I loved natural sciences. I know a bunch of natural science. I've got reference books for rocks and formations, and talk about igneous rock all day long if you want. Um, a lot of people can't anymore. They just don't have that breadth because they're busy playing freaking video games. Sorry. What's this? Awakening to the Muppet Crisis. Why are modern people blind to obvious consequences? That is an excellent question. I think we don't know what consequences are. I think people don't understand conceptually what a consequence is. And when they see a limit, they see it as a problem to be solved, not as a constraint of reality. And they use some of these, we'll call them modern philosophical tropes to justify this. They say, well, we don't have perfect access to reality. They won't say perfect. We don't have direct access to reality. And that is an incorrect statement, by the way. Anybody who makes that statement, you should run away from them or smile and nod and back away slowly. They're a psychopath. That is wrong. We don't have perfect interface with reality. That's what we don't have. But we do have direct interface with reality. And I think people use that as an excuse to, we'll say, ignore consequence and consequences as such. Because that's what I see people doing, right? They'll do the appeal to Hegel. I got into a big argument with somebody the other day about free will. And I said, I'm going to explain to you up front, the argument against free will is self-refuting. And yet he persisted. And I was like, bro. And he ultimately ended, this is hysterical. He ultimately ended on the idea that, in fact, the problem was that he was not going to, he said this, like, I'm not going to accept your way of talking about this. I said, well, that means that you have free will. And that stumped him. For some reason, all the other arguments, like, you can't conceive of free will if it's not a concept in the world, if it's not a thing that you have access to. Somehow that was not convincing. And I honestly don't know why. Alex, welcome.
What's up? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I don't know if I have much to say.
You don't have much to say?
I don't know. This is not one of those good days for me.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Although it's like, although you touch on it, I guess, because it is that feeling of like complete, like, I can't do anything right now, so I might as well just go out and eat some food. It is kind of a competence thing.
Yeah, if you
Now
don't
that you
feel
brought it up.
confident, right? If you don't
Well, I'm
feel
not.
your
Like, I'm
agency
not.
in the world, right?
Yeah.
You have to feel like you're an agent in the world. And man, there's a lot of people out there telling you you aren't. Maybe avoid those people, by the way.
I don't really get a lot of people telling me I'm not. In fact, I don't really. It's just that I don't. I just don't really do much. So, and there's not a lot of people around to, like, tell me, oh, why don't you do this or that? So I just don't get the sense that I am competent. I mean, I can be competent in my job, but not at home.
What do you do for a job?
I was just a fast food, but I do like the breakfast. They moved me to the breakfast times because the lady who used to do breakfast is gone now, and she was there for like 14 or something years, however long it's been open. So I like doing that. I like doing the job because it feels good to cook breakfast and do all that. But like when I get home, I have ideas. I have like stuff I could plan out relatively, but I can't like execute it. So it's kind of it's very annoying thing to deal with.
Yeah. Do people ever call you like an NPC or?
No, I've never had anyone call me that.
Interesting. Have you heard that term? Like, is that something you?
Yeah, I know what that is. But that's like that's kind of like a different term. I think that's the NPC is the term for people who basically use anything on the internet to justify their claims, and they just go with whatever the current narrative is.
That's one way it's used. Yeah, I mean, NPC is somebody who doesn't have any agency, right? They're being manipulated by other forces, and they're not agents in their own right, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people say that there is no agency, for example. That's obviously incorrect. Like those people are manipulating you. If there's no agency, you're kind of screwed. So you also don't have to worry about anything, but it's not
Well, you
good
don't
to
have
not
to-
to be in a position
I
where you
mean,
can't be competent.
it's hard not to worry. I think it's easier to not worry if you're busy. But if you're not busy, all you're ever going to do is go through all the doomsday scrolling and just looking at how bad everything is.
Yeah.
And then you're back in that hole, and it's like is just completely miserable.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, you have to find some way to be competent at something, and that's just building up your skills by failing over and over again until you stop failing.
Yeah.
Do you have any hobbies or anything you like to do outside of work?
I don't know right now. I was intending to program a game, and then I ran into a few bumps, and I got really discouraged about it because it's not working, and I have like too many questions in my head.
Whoops, you froze up. That's not good. The trials and tribulations of trying to stay online while on the move. There you are. Now you're back.
Okay. Yeah, it just cut off from the Wi-Fi since I just left. I say I don't really have a hobby per se, although I try to do something, but I get distracted all the time.
Yeah, it sounds like you haven't disciplined and trained away your anxiety. It's keeping you distracted.
Yeah, and a lot of that is reminiscing too. I even had this weird dream. I was sleeping just like a few hours ago and had this weird dream that kind of reminded me of the past, and that kind of made me upset. So like all that reminiscing doesn't help.
No, we get lost in our memories and our dreams, and then we can't tell them apart, and then things get worse for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you were trying to program a game. I mean, have you done programming before, or?
I mean, I studied it, and I had a job that was like and database. But every time I try to do something on my own, it's just, I really have no idea what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm just not a good programmer. So I gotta tell people that, and it's like they didn't understand. It's like, well, I mean, I would know if I'm sitting there and I don't know what to do, and if I try something it doesn't work, and then I get lost. It's like I'm not a good programmer.
Yeah, that's a good indicator right there. But most people can't program on their own by themselves anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I know some people can they sort of have competence with computers that I don't have.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's just me.
Well, different people have different skills. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
different people are different. We're not all the same. And a lot of people do think, I mean, I've talked to so many people who think you can train anybody to program, and I'm like, I should do corporate training. You can't teach anybody to do any particular thing. Like, lots of people can't program, lots of people can't follow procedures, lots of people. Jordan Peterson talks about this. He had a guy who couldn't stuff envelopes. Like, I mean, people are all over the place. But I mean, there's probably something you can find that you're good at. Maybe building models, right? That's one place to start. That's a good hobby.
Well, I do need to write and try to make stories. It's something I like to do. It's just, it's very hard.
So do you write?
Say what?
Do you write? Do you sit down and actually write?
I mean, I've done it. I don't do it enough.
Yeah, writing requires a lot of discipline, right? Like, and when you sit down to write a story, how do you do it? What are you starting with?
I mean, I usually have an idea if I have an idea, I think I can go based on that. But sometimes on the spot, it tends to be hit or miss. But if I do have a story in my mind, I never forget it. It's just a matter of writing it down. So the ones that I can write, all I have to do is source through my memories and then bring it out into words. But doing that is the hard part, is like actually getting it down. It's like I can remember a story vividly, but I can't write it down as easily.
Yeah, that's a common problem, not being able to communicate clearly what's in your head. And writing's very abstract. I mean, programming's less abstract. So writing's really abstract. Some people do better with really abstract things.
Programming feels very abstract to me. It doesn't feel natural.
Yeah, well, it's definitely not natural. Well, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people who know a lot of languages, spoken languages, tend to be good programmers because there's some similarities there. But knowing a lot of languages doesn't make you a good storyteller, for example. And being a good storyteller doesn't make you a good writer either. And a lot of people don't realize these things are not as connected as they assume.
Yeah. I mean, there's like transferable things, and there's like some connectedness, but you'd find a rare person who has all of those skills at once. And if they do, they're usually really good at it, like everything.
Yeah, but most of those people practice, and that's the problem, is that you don't see what went into them getting that good. Like a lot of people don't realize Elon Musk had a head start in starting businesses, which was a big chunk of money from his father that he blew through. By the way, all his early businesses failed. But that's how you learn to be a successful business person: is you fail at building a bunch of businesses, and then eventually, if you're skillful enough, you'll get good at it. And there's a lot of things that you'll never get good at, no matter how many times you fail or try to learn or whatever is taught to you. So you have to discern that, right? You have to differentiate those things.
Yeah, it's definitely the case.
But good writers typically sit down at the same time every day and commit to blocking off that time and at least trying to write. And they usually have a target of so many words, whether or not they contribute to a story. And some of them will just sit there for the whole time if they can't write and not write a word. And a lot of writers still use typewriters, physical manual typewriters, for that reason.
Yeah, that might be helpful. I think a lot of the problem is this desire to do everything at once, or to kind
Hmm.
of think about everything at once, and it's just too much to think about.
Right.
So, it's easy to think about it if you're like scrolling on the internet and you just get snippets of this, snippets of that, and all this information, all this like bits of information that are like, it's like a web of information that you're familiar with, but you can recurse it over and over. But that doesn't give you any sort of focus
Hmm.
on what you're doing or why you're doing it, or really anything.
Yeah. It destroys your focus, actually, right? It destroys your attention. It re you reattend and reattend and reattend, and then your focus goes away. Your attention keeps shifting.
Yeah,
And then to get your attention back, your brain tries to connect all these things that actually aren't connected at all. And then it feels like you're making progress because you're connecting things. But now you're not learning how to connect things properly because those things may not be connected in the world.
yeah. I've been thinking about competence with people. I mean, usually they call those social skills, but that's like a weird term. I don't really like saying.
Hmm.
Or like emotion. I know, no, I mean emotional skill. Emotional skills or whatever. That's what I meant. That's the
Emotional
term I
IQ.
don't like. Social skills is fine, but I think that I've been thinking a lot about how to, you know, how to sort of be competent in front of people, or be a person that sort of shows confidence. And it seems to elude me every time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, competence comes over time from practice and discipline. And you need to kind of start there. Right. And again, just because you pursue something to be competent at it doesn't mean you can. And that's real hard too, right? You got to know when to give up and try something else. But a lot of people just give up too early too. So these are not easy things to resolve. Is there anybody competent that you look up to?
I think so. Maybe not. Maybe not at the moment.
Hmm. Well, that might be a starting point, right? Is to have an exemplar of competence, right? Especially if it's something you want to try to be competent in, and then use them as a mentor, because you really can't get anywhere without mentors.
Yeah, and I'm always like picky about choosing the mentor too.
Yeah, that can be a problem. I mean, you got to take the help you can get, and not the help that you want, because maybe the help you want's not even out there, right?
Yeah.
And things are easier to learn when you have somebody who already knows it or knows it better than you guiding you. When was the last time you learned something new?
I mean, I drove for Lyft, which is like Uber. I was doing some of that, and then I got tired of it because it's a very bad source of income by my estimation. Unless you wanna like drive at night all the time, picking up people who are doing their late night stuff, or going early in the morning and taking people to work. Because in the middle of the day, it sucks. And the airport is like, there's no reason to wait at the airport because everyone is already waiting there and you'll never get a chance. There's no point. So I was just like, this is way too much gas I'm spending on. It's like, I don't even want to do it anymore. I would rather just work my regular job for potentially less pay because it's just easier.
Yeah, we got Benjamin Franklin. Alex, are you familiar with Adam Eunice? He's a popular game dev streamer. You can learn a lot from him. Apparently, he's a YouTuber.
I've never heard of him. I don't know who he is. What does he do?
Apparently, he's a game developer who streams his creation of games. I don't
Yeah,
think
but what
gaming
kind of
is a
games? Is it
gaming's not
another
a
one of
very good
those?
market, though.
Is it another one of those Pokemon clones?
I don't know what kind of games he builds, but apparently he makes games. So if you wanted to learn to make games, that's one way to do it. That's one way to pick up a skill, is to watch other people do it. I mean, watching things
Yeah.
on YouTube is better than nothing. It's certainly not the best. But according to Benjamin Franklin, I recommend his videos. His YouTube videos teach about programming and game art. Yeah, well, that's a whole science in and of itself, the game art thing. There's a lot down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I usually don't like a lot of art in games, especially now since they all look cheap and kind of too simple. They don't look very beautiful.
Yeah, well, it depends. If you're just cranking out games because you're desperate for money, you're gonna
Yeah,
get
and that's
ugly games.
yeah. It's also like those games that are just cranked out. They don't even run on my computer anymore because they're just, I don't know. It's not like they couldn't. They just don't. They're slow and they crash, and it's like, dude, it's a low polygon asset game. How in the world is this not running on my computer?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
Big frameworks. People use big frameworks. And if they're bad programmers, a big framework will kill your performance every time. It's hard to make things fast, actually, nowadays, unless you build it from scratch. But that has its own set of problems.
Yeah. It's just a lot to do.
Yeah, I mean games. Yeah, games is a pretty big bucket, right? Game programming in general, because there is the art,
Yeah.
there's the story,
It's not.
right, or the
It's not as
process of the
flattering
game.
as. It's just not as flattering as everyone makes it out to be.
No, certainly not. Certainly not. Programming in general is not a it's not a very glamorous job.
It's not fun. I have never. I can't say I've ever really had a lot of fun programming. But that's just me, you know. Some people enjoy it. That's fine, but I don't get it.
Have you tried any other hobbies like building models or maybe one of the large RPG games, board games?
You mean like building them, like the Warhammer stuff?
Yeah, Warhammer's a good example, right? A lot of
That's a lot
people
of money.
they do
I don't have
Dungeons and
money for
Dragons.
any of I just want a second job right now. That's all I want, so I can have more income. But for some reason, that's hard to find.
Jobs are really hard to find. Yeah. I mean, it's you gotta be willing to do things that most other people don't want to do. That's where the good work is. The best way to make money at jobs is not to work 9 to 5, unfortunately. It's to work weekends and nights and things like that. That's where the stable jobs are.
I mean, well, there is the everyone is keeps suggesting to me the credit union, and because they pay big, if you can get in there, they pay everyone big, and it's a huge camp. They have a huge campus with like tons of office space and everything, and everyone's clamoring to get in there and get a job there, get all their benefits and whatever.
Yeah. Same with government jobs, right? I mean, every place has a big employer, and then every place has a government sort of role. And those are the high competition jobs. It's the low competition jobs that are easy to get and pay decently. And that's usually the problem. Like if you aim for something that everybody else is aiming for, the odds that you'll get it go down, irrespective of competency either. So it's a real problem. Do you get outside and go for walks or anything or
Well, I need to do that more. I'm kind of going out right now, and like I was thinking I was gonna watch a movie because I don't know what to do.
yeah, well going for a walk is a better idea. As long as you're in a safe enough place, you're not going to get jumped cuz that can happen.
Yeah, I'm not sure where I would walk at this time of night. I mean, it's early night, but it's not. But it's Friday, so
Yeah, stay away from the bars. That's where all the fights are.
I'll just stay away from downtown. Although they might have more fun down there. I don't know. I'm not a party person.
Yeah, I would avoid the parties and more walk alone, but parties are not all they're cracked up to be.
They certainly don't feel like it. I guess I'm like the guy who stands in the corner in that meme. That's me.
Yeah, well, then parties definitely aren't for you.
So, so the topic of competence. I'm trying to think about that right now.
Mhm. Well, what do you think you're the best at?
Well, personally, I think that I'm the best at um, getting a full understanding of people and like understanding who they are and what they say. But I'm not really good at like keeping up a conversation. You know, maybe I'm wrong about that too. It's like I don't know. I could be just wrong. Right.
Why
Could
do
be
you
just
think
me.
that's what you're competent at?
I don't know. I always I try very hard to um, understand what someone is saying and what they mean by it, and not just take it at face value.
So,
That's usually what I mean by it.
is there an example you have of somebody maybe popular that I might know? Maybe a YouTuber
Popular?
or something?
Maybe, I guess. I know that with Jordan Peterson, I was I was careful to not let myself like worship the man because I knew it'd be too easy to get into a mindset where I just like parrot whatever he says
Mm-hmm.
and then act like that's good enough. But I was interested in him mostly because he came across as like more genuine than most people would. Like you could tell that what he was saying is what he meant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Yeah, and that would be a sign of competence too. It's like so
Yeah,
if I feel like if I feel like if I feel like you're hiding your personality behind like a huge mask, then I don't really care like anything you say or anything you think generally.
Mm-hmm. But do you have any of his books, like 12 Rules for Life?
Yeah, I have those two books, the Order and Chaos books.
Beyond Order is the other one, I believe.
Yeah.
And do
Yeah,
you follow do you follow that? Do you keep your room clean and all that stuff?
I need to clean my room. I need to like vacuum it up.
I think one of the things I like about the clean your room advice is it's something people can do, it's something they have agency and autonomy over, and it's something they can have competence in, right? So I like that's
Well,
one of the reasons why I like that advice.
I was actually thinking, it's odd that in the Old Testament there are a lot of laws pertaining to cleaning. That's like one of the most important things you'll see there. It's like all about being clean. And
Mhm.
I think that's a very important there's like an important thing to relate there where it's like the way you like the most important thing that God wants you to do, or one of them at least, is to be clean, because being a clean person is a way of uh actually being orderly and having your life in order. In addition to a lot of other things, it also make you sick. It makes everyone happy. It makes it easier to plan for the future. Blah 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 blah. Just all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, is that something you can discipline yourself to do though? Is be cleaner?
Yeah, I can do it. I just have to do it. I just have to take the time for it.
Yeah, you have to prioritize it. Otherwise, you won't be competent at it, right? That was one of the things I was talking about. Competency is about, to some extent, prioritization. Are there things other than your job that you think you have some competency at?
I don't know anymore. I really don't. It's like I've been out of college for about 5 years and not much has changed. Like I've changed a lot, but there's like still a lot more to go.
What were there
So
goals you had after you graduated?
no, I didn't have any goals. I mean, generally my goal has always been just have a family and do, normal human stuff. But that just hasn't happened. I just don't have anything like that. So
Well, how are you defining normal human stuff?
normal human stuff like you have a family, you're go to the baseball games or whatever, and you see people around and stuff like that.
Well, what are the things
I
you
don't
have to
know.
do to have a family, do you think?
I Dude, at this point I don't know because I don't feel like it's odd because I gotten very cynical about uh relationships, and it's just it doesn't seem obvious that there are any that there even if there was a girl out there, I don't feel like most of them really care. But plus I don't really know what I'm looking for at all. I'm just not impressed anymore. So I really don't know
So, what is it
what I
that
could
you have to
do.
offer them?
I mean, I don't know at this point.
Well, maybe start there. I mean, that's something you can control at least.
Yeah. It'd be nicer if I had a second job that I could like actually get behind. I just don't like driving. I just don't like sitting in a car a lot and saying that's a job. I like working with my hands if I can.
Yeah, well, is there a machine shop nearby? Yeah, you work with your hands there.
There probably are. I mean, I've never done one of those like machine type jobs.
Mhm.
So I don't really know really know what it's like to get in there.
Yeah, well, I mean, you won't unless you do it, right? So,
Yeah.
can't know about
I
things
think
until you do them.
I applied for like maybe a few things around. I'm still waiting on some of them.
Well, that's good. I mean, you gotta try something, right? I think
Yeah.
you don't wanna get wrapped up in sort of enjoying the job that you're doing for the sake of doing the job that you're doing, right? Because jobs are a means to an end. They're not an end in and of themselves. So liking or not liking a job to me is kind of irrelevant. I mean, I love computers, but man, you get burnt out when you're just building stuff and you know it's not getting used, right? Like, and that
Yeah,
happens in every
I agree.
job. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't like hearing that. I don't like hearing people say, "Well, you just have to find what you like." And my response is, "Well, what if I don't like anything? Then what?"
Yeah, no, you have to find
Oops.
what gives you what you need so that you can get what you like. Because jobs get
Yeah.
you what you want. They're not things that you want.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and if you look at it that way, then the job gets easier too, right? Because you know, like, oh, the purpose of the job is not the job. The purpose of the job is what I can do because I have one.
Hmm.
And a lot of competence is about aim, or about that telos, right? It's about the attitude you have towards the thing you're doing and not all about the thing you're doing, because that can only take you so far.
I don't know if this is off topic, but I was thinking about Brett Weinstein because it was always bothering me when he was his whole idea and everything he talks about now is just like the thing is like I really liked when he was talking about like being aware of what what nature does and like how to understand it so that and how to understand it and then you can utilize it. You can no I was much more interested in his like um descriptions of biology, but once he got into like politics I just can't even stand like any of his ideas. It just drives me up the wall.
Yeah. Well, biology is where he's competent, and he knows absolutely nothing about politics and doesn't even have a good definition and doesn't understand the first thing about it, and is apparently either too lazy or not smart enough to just look it up. I mean, his ideas on how the government should work are, I don't know. I mean, read the founding
Crazy. I didn't
documents,
even
buddy. He hasn't, clearly, right? So that's I mean, but that's an example of somebody getting out of their competence. And competence, because you're a competent biologist doesn't mean you're going to be a competent politician or political commentator or political analyst, right?
yeah.
So you
But
kind
I
of
guess you
sense
have to
that he wasn't competent at politics. So that's good to know.
yeah.
You can at least sense competence in some fashion. That's a useful skill.
But I guess he would have to go through that before he learns his lesson.
Well, they're gonna find out on September
He's
29th,
gonna
right?
he's gonna find out one way or another. Wait, September 29th?
I
Is
think
that
that's when
the
their march is, right?
yeah, their weird march thing?
Yep.
Their propaganda machine?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't call it that. I mean, I think if the
Well,
worst
I think
case
that's what they
scenario
want
is
it to
nothing
be.
happens, right? And they
It
don't get
sound
any good signal.
it sounds like that's what they want it to be because that's what I mean,
I don't.
like
I mean,
how
propaganda has a negative connotation, and I'm sure they don't want the negative connotation. But yeah, I mean, they're trying to get some kind of message across, right? I'm not sure if they have a cohesive. I've never understood what the hell he's talking about with politics because he clearly doesn't know what he's talking about. But I don't know why he thinks even getting the message across will do anything. That's very age of gnosis to me. Like you tell
well, yeah.
somebody something and things happen. That's not the world. So
Yeah, you see, that's part of this idea, this false idea that the culture is created by this sort of um, message system
mhm,
where you just give the message and then you have culture around it that sort
right.
of just happens to be there. And in a sense, I understand why people would think that, because you get like-minded people who show up, and then they're like everything's clicking, and you're all like buddies, and you're all doing stuff together. Like that makes sense, but it doesn't actually generate culture. What you're doing is you're grabbing people away from their previous lives and into a new life. And so you didn't really generate anything, and it's not like they come up with, it's not like they have anything to do but send the message.
Right. Or you're filtering them and you don't realize it, right? And it's yeah, you filter people just by putting out a message, and also people don't realize communication comes last. First action, then communication, right? Or at least first thought and then communication. And people think it's the other way around, right? Communication happens and that causes thoughts or actions. But that's not the way it works. And I don't know why people don't know that. But again, this is part of the competency crisis. And then we've got awakening to the Muppet crisis. Alex, what sort of answers are you searching for?
Answers? I don't know if I need answers. I just need to do more work.
Well, how would you go about doing more work?
Same way everyone else does.
Oh, what's holding you back from doing the same way everybody else does?
I don't know. It's just
Hmm. Well, there's some answers we're
just gotta
searching
get
for right
used.
there.
Just gotta get used to it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It's that like doing it when you don't feel like it. It's that sort of repetition.
Right.
That's really all it is. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
discipline. Do you do you
for
do
long
you do you have a gym membership or anything?
gym. No, I don't go to the gym.
Mm.
Um, I know I've talked to like guys about stuff like that, but I can't turn on the light unless I. Now I've talked to guys about that, but I would also need to go. I would also need to be self motivated. Sometimes that's like very hard to be self motivated.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think you can motivate yourself, generally speaking. I think that's
Yeah.
I think people tell you that to feel better about what they're doing, but I don't think that's what they're doing. Awakening
Yeah.
to the Muppet
Well,
crisis. He says, then stop talking, seek silent prayer, and invest in developing procedural/practical skills like become a locksmith. That's interesting advice. Thank you. Awakening to the Muppet
I
crisis.
mean, I do a lot of prayer already. I've prayed a ton. I do it every day.
Oh yeah,
So
do you do it at the same time every day?
I'll do it intermittently. I'll do it when I feel like I have to, or when something like if something comes up, and then I just take it to God, or it depends. Like I'm not very strict on timing for
Mm-hmm.
that. I just tend to do it whenever I
Yeah.
think I need to.
Well, that's more discipline, right? I mean, that's the strength of liturgy is you're doing something in a
Yeah,
in a timed a
I'm not
timed
very,
cycle.
I'm not
And
very
it
liturgical. I never grew didn't grow up with that.
well, it's discipline really. Sally Joe M. Cooper. A team to bounce off of when you are past the limits of yourself can help. Any domain at any level. Yeah, that's true. Sally's got another one here. A Korean grandma friend in a plastic visor. Yeah, there we go. For me, it was the old guys at the coffee shop, and then disagreeable people on Discord. Can't imagine who you're talking about there, Sally. Disagreeable people on Discord? Sounds very suspect to me. Ixnon, Alex, is there anyone you can ask to go to the gym with you? Yeah, there you go. That's a good question. And do you have anybody like we have accountability groups, or we used to online. We have accountability groups where people would just ask you, check up, like, "Hey, have you done this thing you said you were going to do?" Right?
I mean, I have people around me. I have like a group I go to, but they don't tend to, they don't tend to do that like to my face. If
Hmm.
like I don't like if they do have a problem with me, I don't hear anything about it, so I'm not really sure if they do have a problem with me,
Well, it's
and
not
that
really about a
bothers me.
problem. I mean, you can ask them for help and to keep you accountable, and maybe they can do that for you, right?
Yeah, but they're very concerned right now with politics, so that's at the forefront of their minds.
Hmm. Oops. What happened there? What happened to Alex? There he is. You're back.
Oh, I'm back.
Yeah, you dropped off, but you're back.
Well, I don't know where I was. Hmm. Oh
Well,
well.
your internet was somewhere, but now you're back. So yeah, so a lot of people are concerned with politics, but hopefully that's not all they're concerned with, right? They can help help you with things, hopefully, do things with you, hold you accountable, etc. Help you out, right? Mentor you, whatever.
Yeah. I guess I don't know. I don't know if they expect me to know or to come up with the plan first. I'm always confused by that.
Well, just talk to them. I mean, ask them for help. You go to a church, Alex, or do you have anybody there that can help you?
I go to a church. I've tried to talk to them and it's not really gone well. I don't feel like they're very concerned about solving or solving this problem, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Uh like the church that I'm going to, it's like I went up to them. Like I went up to the pastor and I said, "Hey," or like one of the pastors, I said, "Hey, can I do something? Like I want to do something." And he asked me, "Okay, well, what is your gift? What
Mm.
is your spiritual gift?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And he's like, "Well, maybe you should know that first." And I'm like, "Why do I need to know that first? I don't understand." Because the way they're going about the Bible right now is just it does not sit with me at all. It makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I still go there because I mean, it's generally the same kind of church that I've always gone t it's like the same basically the same thing. The same kinds of people. So I don't dislike going there. It's just like you can't like explain any of your ideas to them at all.
Mm-hmm.
You can't walk through it because they just, they do the Baptist thing where they just say, "Well, the Bible says this, and don't we agree that this is what it says?" And I'm like, "Sure, sure I do. Yeah, if it were that easy."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've got Arandu here. I think you should join the military. Motivation is supplied free of charge and you get to learn skills. Well, that's true about the military, Arandu. You're not wrong about that. It'll help you learn discipline real quick. That's for sure. And it'll give you a bunch of
Maybe,
skills.
maybe I should. That's still an option.
It's not a bad option.
I
It'll
think
change your life, that's for sure.
worst case scenario, join the military.
Yeah,
the worst that can happen to you is you die for the country. That's fine.
I don't know if that's the worst thing that could happen to you, but yeah, I mean,
Well,
it's certainly not terrible. Uh,
yeah.
Sally Joe M. Cooper, people make it all the way through it without purpose. Yeah, well, you can certainly go through the military, but at least you have discipline and learn skills. So small upgrades are better than no upgrades. Sally Joe, uh, take the ASVAB and see what skills are that's useful. Yeah, the ASVAB is actually an interesting test for skills. It's
What
well
is
well
what
structured.
is that?
That's the test that usually taken like high school, and it tells the military what jobs you'd be good at in the military.
Oh, I don't think I ever took that.
Maybe not, but you can if the military has the test, they'll give it to you. Um,
Hmm.
all the skills are not always used for good, Mark. Well, that's true. I didn't say they were used for good. It doesn't
Yeah,
test
but
for knowledge. Yeah, the ASVAB does not test for knowledge, right? It tests for aptitude. Exactly. And that's really valuable, I think, testing for aptitude. It is an aptitude test, not a knowledge test. It's not an IQ test, right? It just gives the military recruiters a good idea of which jobs you'd fit in the military, and whether or not they can fit you in one of those jobs because that happens to be needed. And if nothing else, you can understand what kind of non-military jobs you'd be good at too, right? As a result of the ASVAB. I mean, if you're totally directionless, that'll at least give you a hint as to which directions you might try. But honestly, Alex, your primary problem sounds like discipline, discipline, and discipline. Got to get that down first.
well, it was very helpful to work for Walmart. That was like a couple years ago, and I got out of that, but you learn some things. You learn what's really going on
Mm-hmm.
in around and in the workforce,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't really I didn't really get a sense of any of that, before.
Right.
I had to see it.
Sure. Why'd you leave
And
Walmart?
because I had because for a better job, or at least a job that paid more. But
Well, those are
then
different
I got
things.
yeah, but then I got fired from that job, so
Oh, that
I
sucks.
was
Why'd you
thinking
get fired? Do you know?
I missed a day, one day, and they fired me because they're very, very strict on
Why
that.
did you miss the day? What happened?
Well, that was because I didn't think I could. I was like very upset about something, and I didn't think I could go into work and like actually be presentable, or
Mhm.
or be competent. But I didn't tell them. I didn't
Oh, yeah.
call in or anything, so that's my fault. I even told them, like,
Mm.
the next day I came in, I'm like, yeah, I don't have an excuse. I didn't call in or anything. It's my fault. And so the next day after that, they said, okay, you're fired. And I'm like,
Mm.
okay. I mean, I admit it. I mean, I understand the policy. I understand your policy, but I'm I'm still gonna be honest with you, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Like, yes,
Right.
I don't have an excuse for missing a day. But if
Mhm.
you want to
Mhm.
fire me just for that, that's fine. Whatever. You do you. I think it's a dumb idea, but that's what they want.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they gotta follow the rules, so, rules are still important. Hopefully you learn something from that, right?
Well, I think it's a dumb rule. I think they're trying really hard to just like get people to stay there who will do everything they say. And I think there should be more leeway, there should be more leeway in that, but they don't want to give that leeway. So that tells me what they're about. And it's like I don't really want to work for that. I don't really care. It's like they also like control your schedule. So sometimes you'll be working like 9 days in a row and you don't have a choice on that.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of jobs control your schedule, right? Whether they're 9 to 5 or whether
Well,
they
some of them,
control it by demand like Lyft does.
well, Lyft doesn't really tell you how to do it. They just expect you to do it.
Right, right. But something tells you how to do it, whether it's Lyft or not, right? Like jobs have their own way of
Yeah.
working this out for you, right?
Yeah. With Lyft, it's very, very flexible. You can just do it whenever you want, really. The only limit is how much money you'll actually get if you driving around.
Right. They let you make the trade-off. They don't make it for you.
Yeah.
But that means less money overall. If they're managing the trade-off, they actually pay you better. Yeah. It's just there's no way around that.
Yeah. They also have bad support. So that's the other thing. Like it's very easy to apply and get in and start going like very fast.
Mhm.
But I had this cream soda bottle at the front and I picked up this kid from a high school and I'm pretty sure it was him because who else would it be? He saw me drinking from it. He never said a word. He never said a word when he got out. And the next day, like I find that somebody reported me for drinking. So I had to take a picture of it and say, yeah, it was a cream soda. And that was my whole email. It's like, it's a cream soda. Here's a picture.
Mhm.
Leave me alone. Like
Yeah. Strange. Well, that's the other thing, like Lyft can't protect you against stuff like that because they don't manage your schedule. So it's all trade-offs, you know?
yeah. Well, they got it resolved at least, but it's like it's just so annoying. It's like so don't bring bottles, don't bring glass bottles, even though it clearly says, on the label, which is right there in front of you, what it is.
Mhm.
Don't ask about it, just assume.
Yeah, well, people are like that, unfortunately. They'll draw their own conclusions, and there's not much
Could
you
have been
can do
trying to
about
get me
that.
could have been trying to get me in trouble too. That could have been it.
Yeah, yeah. People are like that, unfortunately, right? I mean, a good job will protect you from that, but usually they'll manage your time, and it's a trade-off. Like, you want more protection, you get more your time gets better managed. So, you just gotta decide which of those you like better, because you're not getting around the problem, you're just making a different set of trade-offs.
Yeah.
Is that something you ever think about? Is what you're sacrificing to get something else, or what you need to sacrifice to get what you want?
Yeah, I think about that a lot. I wonder what kind of sometimes I wonder what kind of person I have to become in order to get a relationship that's or one there's different trade-offs you could do. You could throw morality to the wind and then you'll get something out of it, but you could also like try to you could try to also bend the knee to everyone and try to get them on your side, and it's like I can't do those things. And so I feel like there are a lot of things I cannot really give up just to have a relationship.
Well, what
And
things are you
there's,
willing to give up to have a relationship? Because I mean, that sounds a little extreme on both sides.
I mean, I'm willing to work with it. I'm willing to talk and listen. I'm willing to spend time with it, but I'm not willing to compromise my conscience a lot of the times.
Mhm.
And I'm not willing to how do I want to say this? I don't know.
Well, what is it in terms of conscience you think you have to, compromise on? Like, can you give me an example or
Um I'm not sure how to give an example.
Okay.
I guess this is stuff like I'm thinking about, but I still can't put it in the right words. I don't even know where it is.
Mhm.
It's just that, sometimes you got this feeling that something's wrong and that you just need to avoid it because it's a huge waste of time, and it's a huge, like, it's just like a cesspool waiting for you. So it's like, I don't want to dip my toes in cesspools. No, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know how you'd know that until you dip your toes in. Let's read some comments here. So, awakening to the Muppet Crisis, Alex, the essence of masculinity could be described as quote to take responsibility. That's probably right. Uh, Sally Joe, what if your conscience, as you perceive it alone, is just your familiarity zone? Well, that's a big possibility. And then another one from Awakening to the Muppet Crisis. Alex, outside of your job, what are you responsible for?
Well, my brother needs a job, so I have to tell him to get a job.
So you're
So
holding him
that's
accountable?
yeah, no one else will do it. So it's like
Yeah. Who's
I have
holding
to
you
do it.
accountable?
Hmm?
Who's holding you accountable?
I don't know if anyone is.
Hmm. And what else are you responsible for other than trying to hold your brother accountable?
Um, at the moment, I don't really know.
Hmm. Well, if the essence of masculinity can be described as to take responsibility, then that that might be an issue. And if you can't know if something's a cesspool until you dip your feet in, right? Because everything's trade-offs. I mean, it's easy to look at something and say, "Well, there's all these downsides to this thing." It's like, well, but
Yeah.
what are the upsides, right? Everything has a cost, therefore
But
everything has downside.
you can smell it though.
And maybe you can, maybe you can't. Maybe you think you can, but you actually can't. That's a lot of people, for example, think they can write video games and because they can smell success, but actually they can't because writing video games is really really hard. There's lots of components, and almost nobody has all the skills to do all the components. And so, maybe they could write video games if they worked with 4 or 5 other people. That's much more likely. But if they're trying to do it on their own, the odds that you have the art skills and the skills of making puzzles and playable games or good stories or whatever, and the skills of programming and the skills of, we'll say, marketing the game, you just get vanishingly small as things sort of go on.
Hmm.
So I think that's the problem. I think we often project what we can and cannot know onto the world, And we're never right about that because the world is just way bigger than we realize. Arandu, get a girlfriend, marry her, and then make babies. That will give you responsibility. I don't know, Arandu. Most people get responsible first, and that attracts the woman. You don't get
Yeah, that's the
girls.
thing.
Girls
don't just-
decide who they get
Well,
with.
here's the thing: there are some girls that you can get with, but it could be a ditz. Because there was one girl who liked me, but she was very ditzy, and she
So
was like, I was like, no, not leave me alone, girl. Don't. I
why
can't
is
do
that
it
a
with
problem?
you. Why is what a problem?
That she's ditzy.
I think she was just trying to get me roped in all her like, and trying to get me like to. I think the thing with her was she was like giving me compliments like to try to boost my ego, and that
Mhm.
really turned me off.
Oh, you really need
That like
that. No,
instantly turned
that's
me
not
off.
good. Trying to make you a better
Plus, I never
person.
really, plus I never really cared about her like that anyway. It's like you give a girl one ride home, and she thinks that that you're gonna save her.
Yeah, well, maybe you're the first person to ever do that. Maybe you could have saved her. I don't know.
I don't think I could. I don't think I'm that good.
Well, but she wanted you to be. I mean, why can't you be that good? Sounds
Well,
like a solution to a problem.
because her ex-boyfriend was seeing another girl, and he was taking their son out on their dates, and it's like, you want me to get in that situation? No, thank you.
Well, what I mean, anytime you get involved with somebody, gonna get a bunch of situations that are
Yeah, but I don't need
bad.
that. I don't need that in my life.
Well, I don't know that you get to choose which situations you get into, unfortunately. I mean, that's part of the trade-off. Like you never know what you're gonna get into. Sally Joe, oh no, dumb girls that need help making it through life to get help from a man. The horror that she claims is sarcasm. I would agree. That's
If
pretty
you're gonna
mean.
boot, if you're going to boost my ego to try to get me on your side, no.
Maybe she's gonna boost your ego to make you a better person. Because like
To
it
make me a
sounds
better,
like that would be
if
helpful.
it were about making me a better person, fine. If it's just to make me feel self-righteous and no.
How would you know the difference? And what if the two like go together? I don't understand.
Well, with her, that's not what it was. With her,
How
she
do
was
you know
just
that?
trying, because of what she said to me. It's like, how else would I know?
I mean, it sounds like you don't want to be a better person.
No, I want to be a better person, but I don't want to be, um, I don't want to be like, spoon fed this kind of self righteous attitude to make me think I'm a better person. I'd rather be a better person than just be told I'm a better person in order to convince myself of that. It's like there's a difference there.
If you say so. I mean, we outsource our sanity. I don't know when we're better and when we're not. If the only frame of reference we have is ourselves.
Well, I'm just talking about how she was talking to me.
Can you give me an example?
That's all I mean. That's all I mean by that.
Well, but can you give me an example? I don't know what that means. So
Well, like, I think the one thing she said was, like, it was a joke. It was a very weird joke. She's like, "We should make you the supreme." Like, I was just doing my job, and she's like, "We should make you the supreme overlord." And I'm like, but she said it in a weird way, and I was like, "Is that? I don't understand." Like, because it didn't seem like the kind of it didn't seem to be a sensible joke at all. I'm like, why would I want to be the supreme overlord?
I don't know, Alex. I got to tell you, that's pretty funny to me because I say stuff like that literally all the time. Awakening to the Muppet Crisis. Alex,
That's not
your
very funny.
ego is your problem. Okay, well, there's
So
an
don't call me the
outside
supreme
opinion for you.
overlord. So then don't call me the supreme overlord. Maybe you shouldn't say that.
Why not? I absolutely love pretending I'm the supreme overlord of my Discord server. And anybody in my Discord server will tell you this. It's quite fun. And I think they all enjoy it too, secretly, even though they may deny it. Or not.
They
I
enjoy,
don't really care.
they enjoy your
Um,
competence secretly.
no, I mean it. Look, I mean, I think that's fun and it's good contrast. But you know, you need contrast to see. Awakening to the Muppet Crisis. Pray and consider which of the main sins is most resonant in your life, or ask your friends slash family the same question. If you can't do this, then you lack humility. I think I got to agree with Awakening to the Muppet Crisis on that one too. Wise words indeed. Yeah, I don't know why Supreme Overlord is such a problem. It sounds flattering. Yes, they
It was
should name
also
me the
built into
Supreme
the way.
Overlord.
It was also built into the way she said it. Like I could see what she was. I could tell what she was thinking.
What if you can't? What if you can't tell what other people are thinking? Like, what if that's not even possible for anybody to do?
You give enough time, you can. I mean, you have to tell. You have to be able to tell sometime, right?
No, it's not required at all. You can just face people with their actions. You don't even have to. You don't have to pay
But
attention to
that's
their
what I'm
words.
seeing. I'm seeing their actions. That's all I
You
can
haven't
see.
mentioned any actions. You said the way she said it. Those aren't actions.
Like, what am I supposed to detail the entire thing to you to convince you? I don't have to do that.
No, you're not. Well, first of all, you're not going to convince me because I already don't believe you. So that's not going to
Yeah,
happen.
there we
There's
go.
no
So
information you could give me to convince me
there we
that your
go.
version of this story is correct. Just going to tell you that up front, Alex. And it's not about convincing me because it's already passed and you already screwed that relationship up. So it doesn't really matter.
It was not. It
Um,
was not even a relationship. It was not even anything.
I don't know. I mean, if someone's talking to you, especially like that, that's kind of a relationship. There's 8 billion people on the planet. You're probably not talking
It's
to
got to go
almost
both
any of
ways.
them. You don't have relationships with them for sure.
It's got to go both ways, though. And I'm not gonna do that for everyone.
Well, you don't have to do it for everyone, but you got to do it for someone.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. I mean, ultimately, and I've said this before, people are terrible and they suck because they people all over the place. And it's just awful. But also, what choice do you have? I mean, you're not perfect, they're not perfect, and the world's not perfect. So you have to make a bunch of trade-offs and sacrifices, right? To get things, anything really. And most people don't consider what trade-offs and sacrifices they're making, right? They just get the things and they don't think about it. But when you start reflecting on that, you realize, or you can realize, hopefully, that that's happening all the time. And that helps you to orient in the world and say, all right, well, if I want these other things, what do I have to give up? And it's one of the nice things about Peterson is that he does kind of talk about this. Like, what are you willing to sacrifice to get what you want? Right? Can you clean your room? Right? Can you know when you do these things? Can you like get into a set of habits or a set of rituals or whatever that get you to the next step? Because you got to control your anxiety, and you can only do that through discipline. Basically, I mean, you have to be training yourself otherwise, because the thing you're training is not just what you're training for, but you're also training how to control your anxiety I mean, that was one of the themes of what I was mentioning with the competency crisis. Part of the competency crisis is people don't train their anxiety. And it doesn't matter what your skills are. If you're anxious, you won't be able to be competent, no matter how skillful you are at anything. Like that overrides any set of skills. And that's why part of competency is just training. It's getting up every day and doing the thing, or maybe not every day, but 6 days a week. All right. That's certainly part of it. Ixnon, it does have to go both ways. And you, Alex, chose not to go with her. Yeah, I agree. That's certainly
Yeah, I chose that. I definitely did. What do you mean by training anxiety? Is there anything
when you're
specific?
training, when you train at anything, one of the things you're doing, so when you instill discipline into yourself, one of the side effects of that, one of the things that comes along with that is your anxiety drops. It gets controlled. Part of the purpose of training is actually to get rid of your anxiety and increase your focus. Like that's what training does. The cost is it's very boring. That's true. And the more anxious you are, the more boring it is. But the more boring it is, the more you need to know you need to do it. Like if it's really boring, you really need it. That's the problem. And nobody likes that answer because nobody likes to be bored because being bored is bad. But actually being bored is opening space in your brain that allows you to do other things, right? And controls your anxiety. That boredom is the opposite of anxiety in some ways. And that's actually really important, right? And then you can control which memories come up, which things distract you, why, and how long, right? Because just controlling how long things distract you can make your life totally different. It can change absolutely everything about your life. And training
Yeah.
can be simple. It can be, I get up every day, I drive to this place that has a track, and I walk the track 2 miles or a mile or whatever you can. I can't walk 2 miles. I would collapse. But like that, it can be a simple thing. It doesn't, right? And then once you get used to training, you can train skills, right? And not just train quietness in your mind, which is important too, right? And moving your body is really important because if you're not moving your body, your mind's busier. So moving your body helps to calm your mind. So I have this whole principle I call Zen sweeping, and I mean literal sweeping. Grab a broom and sweep the floor. And there's other things you can do. You can do the dishes. You can do anything that allows for muscle memory to take over. And the reason why you do that is because when your body is doing something regular that it knows how to do, sort of without too much thought, we'll say, it calms your mind down and reduces your anxiety. And the other thing that reduces anxiety is deep breathing. Every once in a while, take a deep belly breath, maybe 2, right? These things help to train away your anxiety because if you have anxiety, you can never be competent in anything. You can never have confidence because even if you have it, it will last about 4 seconds and then you'll be on to the next thing. And that's not helpful. And that's why liturgy is helpful because liturgy is basically anything you do on a regular schedule.
Yes. Yes, that's why liturgy is helpful. That's the other thing that's frustrating about being in a Baptist church is like it's just not easy to talk about stuff like that because you run into all of these sort of circumventing arguments.
Mhm.
And it's just like, look, I just want to make the case that work is a good thing or that doing works is a good thing, but you want to seem to like get around that somehow. And I don't know, it just like it's a big issue. It's a huge issue among us Protestants right now. It's so big it's gonna hurt us I feel like it's gonna hurt us pretty soon.
Yeah, the Protestants are missing a tool or two, and one of them is a really strong liturgy. And the Orthodox and the Catholics don't seem to have that problem. Probably the Anglicans too, right? So that's something to consider as well. But you
Yeah,
can do a liturgy by yourself. Like you can set something up. You can have somebody hold you accountable, maybe go for a walk with them, right? Every day, whatever it is, go to the gym, whatever
yeah,
it is, it doesn't matter. I mean, this is Jocko Willink. Like that's what he does. He instills discipline, which is basically does that through liturgy. He wouldn't call it that, but that's basically what it is. And it works. Like that alone helps a lot of people, especially if you don't have it elsewhere.
yeah. I think it's like super helpful, and it's like it's even like more helpful just for removing the anxiety and not for like
Right.
accomplishing much else. If it accomplishes anything else, it's fine. But like like a super relief.
Hmm.
It's like taking like a bunch of relief pills, and they all work at the same time. Sometimes I feel it doesn't. There's like varying degrees. Sometimes you don't feel like it, or like sometimes you don't feel like reading or whatever. But I think there's also a threshold where after reading enough, it becomes easier to read and I get more out of it. So there
Yeah,
is some
that's
kind of
true of most
threshold.
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's also the advantage of liturgy, right? You do the thing, and then it gets easier. And
Not
keep
just
doing the
easier, but
thing.
it's more fulfilling too. And it's
Right.
more fulfilling faster. It's not it's
Mhm.
all like all of those things at once.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it helps to have people help you with that, right? Because it's hard to do things on your own by yourself. It's just very hard. And there's no reason for that. People will help you if you ask them for help, generally speaking.
Yeah, I don't really know what I would ask for because kind
Yeah.
of
Ask them to go for a walk with you every day at whatever time you have, right? And see if they'll do it.
yeah, there's certain I know I can't ask everyone that, so I have to filter out who I could ask that
Yeah. Yeah,
because
you
I
gotta
really
filter
want
things out. You don't wanna ask everybody, you only need one of them.
yeah.
It's worth considering. I mean, can't get in a worse
Yeah.
situation. If they say no, if everybody says no, you're not any worse off anyway, and you've learned something. You've learned, who you can rely on and who maybe you can't rely on.
Yeah.
Peterson has that whole thing about, when you move into a new neighborhood, the first thing you should do is ask your neighbor for a small favor. That way they'll feel comfortable asking you for a small favor, right?
Maybe I could do that. I don't know what favor I would ask.
Yeah, I don't either. But, you can
I have to
figure
make it
something
up,
out.
I guess. Just show up with a dish and say, I need butter.
Yeah. Awakening to the Muppet Crisis. Alex, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much negative self talk or negative inner monologue do you have? Say 1 is little and 10 is a lot.
10 to 10, I would say I get tens frequently.
That's not surprising. Unfortunate and makes me sad, but not surprising.
But you can learn to live with it. Like, the thing is,
Yeah, but you don't have to live with it.
yeah, I don't mean I don't mean accept it as, I mean live just in spite of it. It's like it's possible to do that,
Sure.
and if anything, I can be proof of that.
Mhm.
Maybe you don't believe me, but that's fine. I don't care. You don't have to believe me. I know it's true.
Oh, no, I know a lot of people that live with a 10 negative self-talk. It's just not good for them, and there's no reason for it, but yeah, they're out there.
But at the same time, it's like I don't want to believe a bunch of lies. It's like I'm very skeptical just in case
Mhm.
like there's an implicit
Yeah.
lie somewhere, because at this point I cannot think in a way that is not like in that mode. I just can't,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
So
right. Well, you have to discipline yourself, train yourself not to do it, right? Or train yourself to do something else, and then you'll squeeze it out of your brain. And that's the problem. I mean, the problem with skepticism is that it's never ending, right? Like right answers are few and far between, but skepticism is infinite, and it's a very big asymmetry. And so, focusing on the skepticism is an endless process. Focusing on what's right and good, that that has some real utility. And again, I mean, if you see things like compromises that you have to make in order to have a relationship with somebody, any kind of relationship, because there's lots of kinds of relationships, uh, as a lie or as something to be skeptical of, then you're not going to be able to make proper trade-offs, right? You're not going to be able to assess costs and risks and accept what you're getting for what you're giving up, and that's actually really important. And I think when people don't get outside enough, the world gets very negative and closed in. I'm very fortunate because I have a huge yard, and I have a pond, and I have dragonflies, and there were butterflies out today after the hurricane, and I'm just surrounded by nature. And I walk out my door to get my mail, and there's just nature everywhere, and it's lovely. It's beautiful to engage with, and occasionally there's a mosquito bite or two, right? Or a tick. That happens too. But like, who cares? Like, it's a small trade-off for having beautiful flowers and turtles and deer and occasional river otters. Somewhere there's a beaver. Got to get rid of him. Uh,
yeah,
and white egrets and blue herons and Canadian geese occasionally, like all kinds of things. I have all these beautiful interactions, right? All these miracles around me, and that keeps me grounded, literally back to the earth, so I don't get stuck in the YouTube world. Not that I don't love YouTube; it's quite interesting, but I don't spend all of my time online or anything, and that's really important, right? I don't spend all my time like in my house, stuck in a room, or in my house wandering around, right? And I never did. My previous house, I had dogs. We'd go out to the woods all the time and walk through the woods. Right? Dogs needed to be walked. Right? We never walked in the neighborhood, by the way. We always walked in the woods. Drive to the woods, which wasn't far away, and walk them. And that was really important. Like, that was an important part of my day, was walking the dogs, not just out in the yard, a small yard in my previous house, but taking them to the woods, running them around, usually off leash, right? Going to different parks and stuff in the area, um, and just having dogs, because that's a lot of work. And you can be skeptical. You say, "Oh, dogs are a lot of work," which is true. They are. You got to train them. Yeah, and that's hard. Yeah, you want liturgy. Train a dog. If you're not liturgical enough, you ain't going to train the dog well. That's for sure. Training dog requires a lot of consistency, a lot of discipline for yourself first and the dog second. And the dog's still going to misbehave and you still got to deal with that. And you can get skeptical about all that. So, well, it doesn't really work, but it's worth the trade off, right? And what did Ixnan's get? Maybe try reading through Psalms 5 a day, first thing in the morning. It's not a bad idea, Ixnan. That's certainly a start. I'm more of the do that and something physical, because the physicality is what really reduces the anxiety. But certainly reading Psalms can't hurt.
I've never cared for living in a city, but that's kind of I'm stuck here.
I loved living in the city. I absolutely loved it. I lived in a small enough city that the woods were at the edge of town and you could drive to the woods in 5 minutes in the car. You could do 15 minutes and get to bigger woods basically, but you know, it
Yeah,
wasn't
I
wasn't
could.
that. There were parks and stuff. There were places to go. There were a few parks I went to with tracks and stuff. The dogs loved that stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't have any problem with cities per se. I'm actually, you know,
I don't
not
know.
that
Maybe
far out of
it's
the city here. So,
maybe it's the rush that really grates me. That really grates on. Maybe it's that kind of moving too fast.
well, cities have a beat, right? They have rush, right? And everyone's different. Boston's pretty slow relative to New York City, for example. Um, so it depends where you live, obviously. But yeah, and some people like that, and some people get burned out by it. And I think Jordan Peterson talks about this, right? Like introverts need to go outside, and that's what recharges them. And certainly, I suppose I'd class myself as an introvert. I really need to go outside, and that's why I live where I live, and it's super cheap actually. So I was always shocked at how inexpensive this house was. Um, and I've got 12 acres of land, and you know, it's great. I'm not far from the capital city of the state, so fantastic life, really.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah, I mean,
Mind
it
it.
depends on what you're looking for, but yeah, I'm all upset because they bought the post office just got delivery vans. I was like, "Oh, this is terrible. It's time to move." The
What
city's
does that
already too
mean?
big for me.
Wait, what is that? How does
They were
that?
delivering mail in their cars, right? It's very
Oh, they used
rural
to.
mail delivery. And now
Oh,
they have actual USPS white postal vans. And so my joke is now that this little town is growing too much and it's time to move further up. I'm not going to do that, but it's just a little joke. It's very funny.
okay. I see.
Yeah, I mean
Do
there
we
are
get like?
markers of they're building like crazy. South Carolina is the most
Ooh,
moved to state in the United States. So, I mean
dude,
I've
they're
been
like
there before that happened, but
apartments complexes.
whoops. There goes Alex again. The worst internet connection of all time. I don't when was the last
Have
there he is.
jobs or because the rent is already expensive. The job market is crazy, and then you have more houses and more apartments coming up, and it's like I don't understand like how this is supposed to work at all.
Mhm. Well, I mean, maybe it can't work for you. It can work for others, but that's the other thing. I mean, things are not designed to work for everyone. We very much have the impression that they are, but that's actually not true. And
I
that's
mean,
okay.
I don't really have to pay a lot in rent, which is great.
Hmm.
So that's like an exception.
That's
Not that I
good.
want to rent. I don't want to rent, but I'm doing it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to get a good, stable job somewhere if you don't want to rent. It's a lot of work. And competence helps, but it sounds like that's part of your struggle, which, a lot of people have that struggle. That's why I did the stream. Well, it's achievable. Like you can discipline yourself, you can become competent, right? But you have to motivate yourself to do it, and you need help. Like you're not going to do it by yourself on your own, that's for sure. Uh that trick never works, as they say.
Yeah. Well, I'm sitting outside the theater. I wonder if I want to see a movie. I don't really feel like it, but it's something to do. Because I was looking through the list and I'm like, I don't really want to see any of these right now. But that's, whatever. I don't
Well,
really like trying to control everything like all my entertainment, because then it's like I don't choose anything.
well, that's
So it's
not
easier.
entertainment if you're controlling it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So it's like it's easier just to go with whatever's there, but at the same time, it's like I don't really want to watch.
Well, how do you know if you're going to like it until you've seen it?
I mean, you could read the descriptions and stuff and
Yeah,
see
but
the
that
trailer.
doesn't tell you anything about the movie.
It tells you a lot. It tells you a
No, it,
whole
it
lot
tells
about
you
the
a lot
movie.
about the person who wrote the description, but only after you've seen the movie. Before
It
that,
will
it
tell
doesn't tell
you.
you anything because the person who wrote
It
the
will tell
description could be
you
an idiot.
exactly what the movie is about. And when you know what the movie is about,
Oh, Alex.
everything that happens,
That's not true at
everything that
all. I've read many
it's
movie descriptions.
true.
One of the things I
It's
talked about, go to the Story
it's
Grid
very true.
website. Go to the Story Grid website when you get on the internet back home and go look up their idea under resources, under heroes of like what the Matrix is about in terms of, the story from the
Who
hero's perspective. And you will
who is this?
discover pretty quickly that some of these descriptions are wrong and they're written by
That's the mate.
incompetent
Yeah,
morons.
but you're talking about the Matrix. That's a complex kind of idea in
From
itself.
Harry Potter. Their Harry Potter description is ridiculous. Their Star Wars description is completely wrong too. Like I was reading those. I was reading them out loud on my Discord server, and we were all saying, I don't know what movie this person watched, but it wasn't the one they listed. Like whatever they're projecting into these characters, and also their descriptions are made for like 8-year-olds,
Yeah.
is not part of the movie. And that's part of the problem. Is that, you may think that whoever's doing the description is accurate about the movie, but the bottom line is often the movie makers don't know what movie they're making. That happens a
There is
lot.
there is sometimes that happens, yeah. I think
Well, you got
that
to get surprised. So you can't assume that the description tells you what you need to know if you're going to have a good time watching the film.
I do, because I want the description to actually be trying to convey what the movie is about. It doesn't always happen.
Right, but that's what I
And
mean. Like it doesn't
I do
always
have
happen.
I also have preferences. So it's
Well,
like,
and a description can't give you anything like enough information about a movie.
no, that's not what it's for. It's not for having all that information. It's for having a baseline,
It's
or
for
it's like,
attracting a certain audience. That's
and for
all it's
attracting a
for.
certain
It's
audience.
a very narrow field, a description. It's a very because descriptions have audiences.
But
Descriptions are written for audiences.
when you are attracting a certain audience, if the movie is not about that, you are creating this like
Mhm.
disillusionment.
Yeah. Well, that's Hollywood in the past 15 years on almost everything. But what's your point? That's been happening pretty regular. I mean, this is
Yeah.
why Critical Drinker, for example, is big, right? Because he's like, well, I don't know what they're doing here. Like, I just watched one of his things. He was talking about the battle scene in Rings of Power season 2, and he was comparing the battle scene from Lord of the Rings that are supposedly very similar. And I think he's probably right. He's a pretty smart guy, right? But like that's part of the competency crisis. He's clearly a more competent writer than any of the writers in Hollywood right now. I mean that technically. I can prove that. Absolutely. That's a big problem. Which is no shade on him. It's like, well, why isn't Hollywood hiring him? He clearly has a better idea of what's going on and what needs to go on than these other
Yeah.
people. So now you have two problems. One is you have a bad movie. How are you going to write a good description of a bad movie? Or if you have a good movie, the person writing the description may not realize that. Like, I mean, there's a huge mismatch. The last time that I didn't even engage with the description. The last time I got like a really interesting movie recommendation was actually Sargon of Akkad, Carl Benjamin. Um, he was talking about the Joker and he had just gone to see the Joker. And what he did was he said, well, I just saw the Joker. And if you haven't seen the Joker, you need to go see it right now. And what happened is I literally stopped the video. I got up out of my office and I went and looked up the movie was playing in the next like 30 minutes, and I happened to live 10 minutes from the theater. And I got my ass over to the theater, watched the damn movie, which was phenomenal, by the way. Not the new one. This is the original one from a few years ago. And then I came back and watched his assessment. And that was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life because that was a phenomenal movie, right? Godzilla minus one. Just needed to see a movie. Love Godzilla. Didn't even look at the description. Had a blast. Had an absolute, what a wonderful film. Not made by Hollywood, by the way. Interesting. So you don't know what you're going to get. So you should engage with, um, with with your intuition rather than trying to predict the world.
I would
Benjamin
rather.
Franklin. Let me
Yeah,
read
go
through the
ahead.
comment. Benjamin Franklin. Really, Critical Drinker seems to just complain about small details in his film reviews. I don't know what you're watching. You're not watching Critical Drinker, or maybe you can't watch Critical Drinker. His latest one, outlining good versus bad battle scene. That was really detailed. It was quite good, actually. Those are not small things. Critical Drinker never talks about anything small. In fact, he goes out of his way to say, "Well, this might be nitpicking, but also this is here," and then he makes bigger points. So if that's what you see, Benjamin, then maybe that's not for you.
I don't like. I'm fine with Critical Drinker for the most part, but I do think that he's. I don't think that he's. I don't know how to say it. Like he's not. I don't like everything. Every kind of stance he goes on.
Yeah, that's not required.
But I
Why should
mean,
every stance someone takes?
well, yeah, I'd have like I don't know. I
It's
don't need to
good.
get into that. It doesn't matter.
It, it's good to have a movie reviewer if you're gonna watch movies who gives you movie reviews that resonate with you. Like I never liked Roger Ebert, but he was very useful because like if you understood what he was doing in his reviews, you could figure out whether or not the movie was for you. He was at least really good at that actually because he was extremely consistent. I didn't like the way he did his reviews. I thought they were crap, but they were useful for a lot of people and I could use them. It just took
But
a lot of effort.
consistency is very, very useful.
Yeah, it really is. Right. And you get consistency through ritual, through liturgy, through discipline. That's how you train consistency. And if you have consistency, it's easy to spot in others too. So,
Yeah.
But maybe you should
All
just
right.
take a chance, Alex, and go see a movie.
I mean, I know it's gonna play right now. Like it's going through the, it's like it's gonna take another like 25 minutes for all those trailers to go by. So
Yeah, maybe you
like
should
I
watch
heard
the
it was
trailers. You might find out
it's gonna
something
be like
there
some of
too.
the same trailers I've seen before, and it's like I don't need to watch all those trailers again. It's so
Well,
tiresome.
if you're going to the movies, you go for the experience, and
Yeah,
put
I
up
go
with a
for
little
this. It's
boringness,
not
then
the trailers.
so be it.
The trailers are not part of the experience.
Well, I mean, they are for them,
For who?
for the people who make the experience, right? Like they've curated the experience, and that's part of it. And maybe it's the least interesting part or something for some people. Some people actually like trailers, um,
I
but
don't
it is
mind
part of the
trailers.
experience.
It's just like I've already seen some of them, and I know like I know like at least one of them that's gonna pop up. It'd probably be different now because we're having a new cycle. But yeah,
Yeah. Well, you don't even actually know if you've seen them. Yeah. Yeah.
one of them.
Benjamin Franklin. Let me just read this. I kind of like Thomas Flight and like Stories of Old. Yeah, Stories of Old is okay. Compare their style of film review to Critical Drinker. There's no compare. Yeah, there was no comparison. There are different styles of film review. So what? But your comment about Critical Drinker is invalid. But I suppose different people have different subjective tastes. Well, by definition, that's kind of a banal statement. David, read a good book. I don't know, David. Reading books is not all it's cracked up to be. Do you know how many people don't understand the allegory of Plato's cave at all? See my video on the lies of Plato's cave.
Reading books is pretty good. I don't know what you're
It
talking
can
about.
be. Well, I mean, if you're at the theater, take a chance. Pick a movie, go see it. See how you like it.
Reading books is pretty good. I don't know.
Depends which books you read. If you read romance novels, it's not great. But
If you read Don Quixote, it's pretty good. I have to finish that.
maybe. I don't think I'm a fan of that sort of postmodern reframing sort of book, but
You think it's postmodern reframing?
yeah. Yep,
I
I
don't think
do.
so.
A lot of
I
people
don't
don't
think
think
it's.
so. Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
if anything, it's realistic. Like
it's actually about fantasy. So I
yeah,
don't
but
know
it's
how
not. It is about fantasy, but it
about
has
somebody
some
acting
very.
out their fantasy.
Some of the conversations they have are extremely interesting because they do like it does bring into question like doesn't the fantasy have utility or like have some kind of is it
Mhm.
does it have like something good in it that's applicable to the real world? And there's like cases being made for that, and it's like it's actually very interesting to think about all that because it's like because that's what the characters are trying to understand, right?
Mhm.
Nobody's thinking about any of this until this crazy guy starts thinking he's a knight, and then all of a sudden like their whole lives are changed. So the question
Yep.
is, well, I mean, was I mean, is it really such a bad thing that he's doing this?
Jordan Peterson, what you do matters. But let me get to some comments. Mask of Shy. Boy, that sounds familiar, although brain is failing me. It's Pirate Mark. Yes, it is. Benjamin Franklin. Books are not as easy as watching films. Well, that's true. There's also less propaganda in books to some extent, sometimes. The last good book I read was Diary of a Madman. I'm a big fan of Gogol. Uh, Sally Joe, Mark once told me, quote, books are not people, end quote. Wrecking my childhood again. No problem, Sally. Glad I could help. Um, David, Goethe wrote very good romance novels, and so did Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. But Mark, generally, I would agree with you. Yeah, well, look, fair. Romance, the idea of romance has changed quite a bit over the years, I would say.
Yeah, it's more like
So,
it's more like it's more like full of weird, you know, weird stuff. Or like you find if you just pick up a random book, it'll probably be something kinky, and it's like, why did you people write this? What's wrong with you?
stick with the classics. Mask of Shy.
Yeah.
Alessandro. Oh, hello, Alessandro. Good to see you. Been too long. Sally Joe. Understanding books, characters is not understanding people. That is correct, and people can get lost in that fact. Well said, Sally. Yeah, a lot of people think
No,
you can know more about life by reading books, but actually, you know more about life by like participating in things.
but you have to hear stories of people too. So
Yeah,
there's
you should
a
listen to
difference.
people tell you stories, right? Reading books,
History is
less of a
also
story.
that. History is all written. History is also that.
A lot of written history is fake stories about the past. That's true. Mask of Shy. I like the 19th century romance. Check out Gustav Dor's art. All right, I can check that out. I guess maybe someday. It's a good. It's a good tip. 19th century romance. I don't know. Romance is a tricky thing. Like I said, modern romance is certainly not the best. But Nassim Taleb, right? Don't read books that are less than 200 years old or something. He likes to go back. I think that's generally good advice. If it's survived a long time through the Lindy effect, probably a good book. The
I mean,
exception
hey,
might be all of his books.
I read beyond. I read 12 Rules for Life.
That's good.
That is a good book.
How many of them did you implement?
I don't even remember all of them. Like
Mm,
I only read it once.
mm. Maybe you should write out the 12 rules and post them somewhere and read them every day. That would be good book participation. Sally
Maybe.
Joe, you know more about books by reading books. Right. And maybe if you fill your head with knowing about books, you know less about people, because that certainly seems to track. Orandu, when I was your age, television was called books. There we go. That's true. Back when I was a boy, we got to get off Orandu's lawn. I think he's angry. Um, yeah. And movies are sort of a cheaper way to get the book experience compressed to you into your brain.
Cheaper for the audience. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, they make movies a lot quicker than authors write books. It's cheaper in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but it's just expensive. You gotta organize people, get them all together, do a bunch of legal stuff, and then you have to get all the equipment and blah blah
Different
blah.
different trade-offs. To write, you got to write
Yeah.
every day, and most of your writing gets thrown out. It's complete garbage. Sally Joe, I hate it too, Alex. Seriously, books are my friends, except they were not people. And yep, depressing as all to find out. Better I did though. Yeah. Well,
Hey,
it
what?
sucks. Well, she's
Wait, what?
basically saying books were her friends, and then like it was depressing to find out that they weren't her friends because they're books and not people, right? And that's depressing. Yeah. But it's better for you. It's better for you to know that books are books and they're not people, and you can spend time with books, you can spend time with people, but there's trade-offs, and you don't want to spend too much time with books. Let me put it that way. And that's or too much time with movies for that matter, um, or TV shows, because I know somebody who does that. Right, I know lots of people that do that, or video games. I know lots of people spend too much time with video games, right, and not enough time with people, and then they don't know people very well, and then the cycle continues and it gets worse, right? The less time you spend with people, the harder it is to spend time with people, and then the less time you want to spend time with people. And that's a hard cycle to get out of.
All right. Coming up on time. I might as well get out.
All right, Alex. Well, hey,
Okay.
it was good to meet you, and good luck, man.
Yeah. We'll see you around, maybe.
Yeah, well, I'm usually here Friday nights, so feel free to jump in again
Okay.
and watch all my videos on navigating patterns because they're awesome, and maybe you'll learn a thing or two.
All right.
All right,
God bless
enjoy
you,
your
man.
evening.
Yeah.
All right. Benjamin Franklin. I binge watched Terminator Zero recently. That was a good show. Well, Critical Drinker had quite a lot of good things to say about it. So there you go. In fact, I considered watching it myself because of his review, which I think came out today or yesterday. Very recently, anyway. Yeah, I watched the Terminator Zero review today. I don't think I'm up for more series. I'm still chewing through Battlestar Galactica, which is 2004 one. Yeah, that's you want incompetence. Yeah, and yeah, I was gonna mention the critical drinker and competency crisis. It really is part of the competency crisis that he's a much better, we'll say, storyteller and understander of movies than most people. Certainly, almost all the reviewers out there, and even some of the guys he has on. I mean, I like them all, but they don't do as good a job as he does. But then he's an author; he's a published author, and his concern is story as such and character development as such. So he has a very good grasp on plot, and that's what I care about. I don't care about flashy movie scenes. Not that I don't, oh, a good Michael Bay film every once in a while. Absolutely. But like Avatar was a catastrophe. What a catastrophe. I didn't watch the second one. The first one was a catastrophe. Like, what the hell even is this? Or Barbie. Like, people do reviews of Barbie as though it's a movie, and Barbie was not a movie. Sorry. I have a video on that, Barbenheimer, that talks about why it's not a movie and sort of exemplifies that point. And that's part of the competency crisis. I mean, the woman and the guy who wrote it are pissed off that people identified with Ken as a hero. It's like, well, then you don't understand heroics, and you don't understand plot, and you don't understand audiences. And like, I could go on about the things you don't understand if you didn't see that one coming. That's part of the incompetency crisis. Benjamin Franklin. Wow, he spills critical drinker on ILI and taste 1% of the time. It's not a matter of taste with him, dude. Like, I don't know why you'd bring that up. I don't know how you'd know. I mean, if you're watching his stuff, then goes through good movies and bad movies. I'll definitely watch his review. I didn't know he made a review of Terminator Zero. Well, now you know. Sally Joe. Does more information make it easier to imagine more fictional things? Yeah, of course it does, Sally. That's a good point. It does make it easier to imagine fictional things. The more pieces you have, the more relationships you can make. Unfortunately, almost all relationships are invalid, and no one tells you that, but like, also true, right? And it's reality. A good partial definition of reality that I like to use: reality is that which objects to your subjective experience. It's not objective, it objects. It's an action, right? It's an action, roughly speaking, in opposition, right? If something opposes you, it's probably real. There you go. And that's part of the problem. Benjamin Franklin. Avatar is very basic. James Cameron, in general, is a basic filmmaker. It's not high philosophy stuff. It's bad storytelling, and it's crappy, and it doesn't match what humans do in the real world. And I don't think that Cameron generally makes basic films. I think he was over focused on effects and under focused on story. And I think part of the problem is that people focus very much on these individuals But I think we can all agree the thing that made, we'll say, the first 3 released Star Wars movies good were the ad libs from the actors, which are all famous lines out of the movie, and none of the written lines are famous out of the movie. And the fact that George Lucas got a lot of pushback, and that made him better. And it's well known that he didn't get any pushback for the prequels, and the prequels are not as good. And fortunately, we have the stuff that came after the prequels, which just exemplifies the competency crisis, like from 3 different perspectives, where those incompetent retards who shouldn't have been allowed to make anything ever, and I do mean that technically, make the prequels look better, which is sort of hard to do because prequels aren't fantastic. But I was never as down on prequels as other people were, but prequels are not great. But Lucas is a competent storyteller. The stories are competently told. The copying that were done in the last Star Wars movies there by guys like Jar Jar Abrams, who's completely incompetent storyteller, obviously, yeah, just badness lifts up the goodness sometimes. Benjamin Franklin, I guess it's been said before, Avatar is Dances with Wolves with aliens. Well, except it's not as well told a story. I mean, Dances with Wolves is an excellently told story. And Avatar is not an excellently told story. It's just a bunch of flashy pictures and CGI on a screen, and the story doesn't come through, right? It's the same story as in Last Samurai too, right? It's excellent stuff, but it's just not well told. And again, that's why I like Critical Drinker, because he focuses on the quality of the storytelling and the quality of character development, which is all a movie should really be about, or a book for that matter. And anything that isn't about those things is probably just fluffy entertainment. Nothing wrong with fluffy entertainment once in a while, but also curate your signal. But again, Critical Drinker is a great exemplification of why what's going on with competency. Why is some guy on the internet who's a, a, an author at least, right, is able to actually remake the movies? I love it when he fixes things. The Critical Drinker fixes, those are excellent, because you really get to see him at the top of his personal game. How would I fix this with these weird constraints? I'm like, oh, I like this. You're going to fix it with constraints. That's brilliant. And he does a fairly decent job of it. I don't always agree with everything he does or anything, but like, I see his process and I like it. I like that he has a process and that his process works really well. Mask of Shy. I really like the prequels. I like the prequels, but I get they aren't for everyone. I have watched all the prequels more than once. Like, they are enjoyable enough movies for me. The stuff that came after them, total garbage. I wonder, Mark, do you think some good stories that are not for certain people, or a good story always works for everyone? No, it's a good point. Like, a good story doesn't always work for everyone. Different people need to hear different things at different times. That's another factor. There's a lot of stories that cannot resonate with certain people because they just don't have the life experience. And so those stories aren't good for them. I think that's, it's an excellent point. It's good thing to point out. I really appreciate that you pointed that out. Not a good story is not good for everyone. It really depends on your circumstances and what you need. I mean, a lot of the stuff that people find, really to be really good, I just get bored by it because I'm like, I already know all this stuff. And a good story should take you on a journey, and that journey should be somewhat unfamiliar to you in some way. And if you're a pattern person, which obviously I am, navigating patterns, then a lot of these patterns are sort of like, yeah, I know that pattern. Boring, right? Like, I'm very good at predicting movies. And I do like to get fooled. So like, I remember watching Sixth Sense, and I was pissed. I was absolutely pissed because I had it. had the thread, had the question in my head. Wait a minute. Like, what happened after he went into the ambulance? And I lost the damn question because M. Night Shyamalan, who knows who was around him making him better, because his other films aren't that good. That I think that's his best film. We don't know why. It wasn't him. We know that because his other films are, some of them are real garbage. Some of them are decent, but they're not as good as Sixth Sense. I lost the thread on Sixth Sense and he fooled me and I was pissed off. Ridiculous. I'm being, for sure. Also legit, like I'm still angry. How did he do that? How dare he do that to me? I'm very good at this. I didn't get fooled by Crying Game one little bit, right? Like usually the filmmakers can't fool me because I see these patterns and I know when they're subverting the pattern because I see the pattern. It's easy to see the subversion, right? But I don't know who he was hanging out with then or who was pushing back on him or making him better. But like we tend to attribute these films to one person, and that's actually wrong. Who's the story fixer, right? Who's hanging out with them? Who's pushing back? What fights are they having? Because that's actually really important. Who's pushing back and how hard? That's what makes you better. Somebody pushing back, right? Not yes, man, agreeing with you. Again, this is famous. You can. A bunch of people talk about this with the Star Wars prequels. Like the prequels are because no one pushed back on Lucas. Probably. I mean, I wasn't there, but like, boy, it sure seems that way, right? Whereas the initial ones, the best lines in those movies are all ad-libbed. All of them. They weren't written by Lucas because he's not a great writer. He's okay, but he's not great. And that's why his lines are not the ones that are remembered. And that's why Ewoks and Jar Jar Binks. Ah, really, dude? Really? Like, how did you screw that up? Twice. Yeah. Benjamin Franklin. Hostiles is my favorite film about conflict between Native Americans and white colonists. If you haven't watched it, I recommend it. Okay, thank you. It shows a nuanced view that shows the violence and evilness of the Native Americans. There was certainly a lot of that. I like where the hero villains are gray. I don't like that. A lot of what the Native Americans did that was, we'll say, bad was caused by the French. And if you don't understand that, fair enough. Look up King Philip's War, which is the first American Indian War and the deadliest war by population in U.S. history. No one knows that. Also, hard to find information on it, especially good ones. I have a book somewhere, probably in the shed. All my books are still in the shed. Very good book, though. It's a tiny 90-page book, but it's actually very good. Yeah, any kind of competency is important. But since nobody else will join me, and that is fine, and I am tired, it's been 3.5 hours, I'm going to shut the stream down. So if you get any last comments, put them in now. But think about this competency thing and start looking for the pattern of the lack of competency and realizing this is part of the chaos. Like competency creates chaos, or lack of competency, I should say. And that's the problem. And it's a big issue. Ixnon. So where does the Star Wars Christmas special rank next to the prequel? Dude, I have never seen the Star Wars Christmas special. Sorry. I knew better. T. Sanders. Take care, Mark, and thanks for the great streams. My pleasure, sir. I'm happy that anybody watches it all. That's great. I wish more people would watch, but I'm very happy that anybody watches. So look, everybody have a great week. I don't there's any bar to a stream next week, although I have to feed myself next week before my own stream. That's hard. Yeah, I'm losing my my support staff here in the house. Mask of Shy. Buenas noches, Mark. I used to know what that meant, but like I was never good at languages, even English. Terrible. Yeah, there'll be a stream next week. I don't know what the topic will be yet. We got lots of topics to cover. I don't know what I'm putting. Oh no, I do. I'm putting out another commentary video. It got a little delayed. Some of that is my fault. Some of that is my editor. Worst editor ever. But yeah, we got a commentary coming out. It's Peugeot with Jordan Hall and John Vervaeke. Those of you are confused by Jordan Hall and or John Vervaeke, hopefully I can enlighten you on 23 minutes of that conversation, which takes me forever, by the way. Also, I think every word is necessary, but that'll be coming out this coming week here. And yeah, next week we'll do another stream. Hopefully Alex will enjoy his movie and maybe try to instill a little discipline in himself. And I'm going to try to get more videos done. I was going to do some recording today. This storm really messed everything up. I didn't have any damage or anything. The car cover got blown off my beautiful car, which is totally my fault because I have a way to secure it. I didn't use that. I didn't even think of it. But everything's fine. Like nothing's wrong. So it's like, it was a real storm. Finally, first hurricane, it was real. But also fairly minor. I got all the trees cut down already, so nothing bad happened. I lost power a couple times. The wind was loud. The rain woke me up a few times. No big deal. Probably not going to happen next week, although you never know with hurricanes. Everybody have a great week. I will see you next week. I will probably get some more videos out next week to you other than just the commentary. Hopefully I'll sit down and do that at some point. Ixnon wants an update on the Matrix project. I put some minor notes in, but really Jesse and I have to sit down and have another call like we had last time. Only this time I'll be at my computer and able to take notes, which I didn't do last time, which is my bad. I was outside, which would have been fine had I a computer to take notes on, but I did not do that. Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. We had a really good outline when we talked, and I didn't take notes. That is my fault. And the new notes file is just huge, and we have to sort through it. But yeah, we'll get there. And Jesse's busy, so I don't get to talk to Jesse nearly enough. The only way I get to talk to Jesse nearly enough is if he were my neighbor. But since he lives in Australia and probably doesn't want to move, that's not going to happen. And I'm not moving to Australia. But we'll get there. We'll get there. I promise. There's so much too. Like, every week I find something new and I'm like, oh, I got to for that. You know, there's just so much to talk about with the Matrix, especially with respect to film and the change in film. And yeah. And plus I got to watch it again, which is going to be fun. But we'll get there. I promise. Yeah. And I got other videos, sort of really important from in my mind anyway, videos to do. And we are still tweaking the channel and things like that. So, and if you got any suggestions, fire them up. I'm always open. Have a great week. Working on the Matrix project. Promise. It is moving. I commented in the file. I promise. I'll get with Jesse at some point. We'll have another long conversation about it so we can get that scheduled. I will see you all next week. We'll have a new topic. If you get any suggestions, put them in the comments or whatever. I always consider suggestions. Some of these live streams are based on suggestions from viewers, or jump on the Discord server and look for competence and try to exemplify competence when you have it, and look for exemplars of competence, because that's one of the keys to fixing the world. Certainly not listening to Brett Weinstein about politics is another key, because my goodness, what a train wreck he is. It's too bad. I really liked his earlier work, especially around fake news virus scam, but people go off the rails all the time. And that might be happening with other people too, unfortunately. More on that next week. Enjoy. Have a great time, everybody.